Chapter 191. Once she left the restaurant, Mo Tienga already had a destination in mind. She walked straight along the main street. After walking for a short distance, she saw a very luxurious blue cloud building in the center of the city. As soon as she entered the restaurant, a waiter immediately came to greet her with a big smile. "Fairy, please go upstairs, please go upstairs." Mo Tienga nodded and followed the waiter all the way to the third floor. As soon as she reached the third floor, she immediately felt several gazes on her. She discreetly sized up her surroundings. Compared to the first floor, the third floor was less luxurious, but it was more elegant. There were about 5 or 6 mahogany tables in the spacious space. Each table was separated by flowers and trees, looking extremely elegant. There were already 3 tables occupied by guests. All of them were male cultivators, and their cultivation levels were all in the aura refining realm. Mo Tienga thought to herself that Bichuan Court was, after all, a small or medium-sized cultivation group. If individual cultivators could cultivate to the foundation building realm, they would have been recruited long ago, even if they were male cultivators. At the first table, there were 2 middle-aged men who were chatting animatedly. When they saw Mo Tienga, they glanced at her with some surprise, but they soon turned back to continue their conversation. At the second table, there were both young and old people who were chatting casually. Upon seeing her, several people stared at her as if they were trying to guess her origin. At the third table, there were 3 young people chatting loudly. They seemed to be the children of some cultivation clans. They weren't as down and out as individual cultivators. "Fairy, this way please." The waiter led Mo Tienga to an empty table and swiftly served her tea. He asked, "Fairy, what would you like to order?" Mo Tienga muttered to herself for a moment, then said, "Some refreshments will be fine." "Yes, yes," the waiter said repeatedly. "Please wait a moment, Fairy. It'll be served soon." After the waiter went downstairs, Mo Tienga picked up the teacup and took a leisurely sip. The manager of the small restaurant told her that in Linhai town, most cultivators and mortals lived together. Mortals were very respectful to cultivators, so cultivators enjoyed a lot of power here. In Linhai town, mortals treated both Bichuan Court disciples and individual cultivators with extreme respect. There were even some facilities specially prepared for cultivators, such as the third floor of the Azure Cloud restaurant. This was the biggest restaurant in Linhai town. Reportedly, the boss had a very good relationship with the fairies of Bichuan Court. The third floor of the Azure Cloud restaurant was only open to cultivators. Any cultivator, even if they were only in the first layer of the aura refining realm, could eat and drink here for free. Therefore, no matter if it was the disciples of the sects, clans, or independent cultivators in the vicinity of Waterfront City, they would all come to the Azure Cloud brothel when they had nothing to do and exchange some news. After inquiring about these things, Mo Tienga didn't say anything else and came to this place. The reason why he didn't ask the shopkeeper directly was because the shopkeeper was, after all, a mortal. Some things were more reliable to hear from the mouth of a cultivator. As she sat there, she had already sized up all the people at the 3 tables. She had the spirit-concealing pendant with her, so she deliberately suppressed her cultivation level to make others feel that she was still in the aura refining realm, but they couldn't see through her. Among the 8 or 9 cultivators here, the strongest one was only in the 6th layer of the aura refining realm, so they didn't notice anything strange at all. Not long after the waiter went downstairs, the 3 young men at the third table looked at each other. One of them got up and walked over to her. "Fellow Taoist, I'm Wei Ziming. Nice to meet you." Mo Tienga pretended to have just noticed him and stood up to greet him. "I'm Yi Xiaotian. Nice to meet you, fellow Taoist Wei." Seeing that she returned his greeting, a hint of joy flashed across Wei Ziming's eyes. He greeted her again. "So it's Miss Yi." Just now, he called her fellow Taoist, but now he called her Mississippi. Mo Tienga smiled without batting an eyelid. "Fellow Taoist Wei is too polite. Is there something I can help you with?" "Oh, it's like this." Seeing that her attitude was kind, Wei Ziming also smiled from ear to ear. "I wonder if Miss is alone? If you are, it's fate that we met. How about we talk about the path of immortality together?" Mo Tienga was sitting there because she was waiting for someone to take the initiative to talk to her. Now that she heard Wei Ziming's words, she thought for a moment, then smiled and said, "How can I refuse fellow Taoist Wei's kindness? I'm also bored sitting here by myself, so I'll accept your invitation." Wei Ziming was overjoyed. "Miss, please come over here." He then shouted, "Waiter!" Thump, thump, thump sounds of footsteps could be heard from the stairway. A waiter immediately ran up with Mo Tienga's tea and pastries in his hands. Wei Ziming waved his hand and said, Take our table away and bring another good one. The waiter's gaze shifted. He understood what Mo Chenga meant, so he immediately nodded and bowed. Yes, yes. He then put the tea and pastries aside, tidied up the three people's table and went downstairs. Since the third floor was specially set up for cultivators, the waiter's attitude was naturally attentive. Soon, several other people came up and once again served hot dishes, wine and delicacies. Cultivators in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm and above would gradually lose their sense of worldly affairs. These people were all below the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, so they naturally ate and drank like mortals. Miss Yi, please. Wei Ziming smiled. The two young cultivators sitting at the same table with him also stood up with a kind attitude. Mo Chenga raised her hand to greet these people before sitting down. As soon as she sat down, Wei Ziming eagerly poured wine for her. Miss Yi, let me introduce you. These are my two good friends Huang Jifeng and Yu Yang. Mo Chenga raised her head to look at the two of them. Wei Ziming had the demeanor of a distinguished young master. Huang Jifeng's demeanor was slightly inferior to his, but he was a bit more handsome. Yu Yang, on the other hand, was very shy and seemed to be the youngest among them. He seemed to be less than 20 years old. Among the three of them, the one with the highest cultivation level was Wei Ziming, who was in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm. The other two were both in the 4th layer. Mo Chenga inwardly speculated that these three people were undoubtedly the children of cultivation clans. She was quite experienced now, so she usually wouldn't make a mistake. I'm Yi Xiaotian. Greetings to the two fellow Taoists. She politely raised her hand to greet them. Her attitude seemed to make the two people feel somewhat flattered. They hastily returned her greeting while repeatedly saying they didn't dare. Mo Chenga felt a bit strange. Even if her cultivation level was higher than theirs, she only suppressed it to around the 7th layer of the aura refining realm, so they didn't need to greet her like this. After the four people finished greeting each other, Wei Ziming raised his cup and said with a smile, "May I know which fairy of Bichuan Court is Miss Ye's disciple?" Mo Chenga smiled then said faintly, "I'm not a disciple of Bichuan Court." The moment she said that, the three of them were stunned. Wei Ziming blinked as if he didn't quite believe her. He then asked with a slight stutter, "Miss? You have this kind of cultivation level, but why aren't you a disciple of Bichuan Court?" Mo Chenga smiled and said, "To be honest, I'm an individual cultivator from Kunwu. I came here by accident, but I don't know how to leave." As she said that, Mo Chenga secretly paid attention to their reactions. However, she saw that all three of them had astonished expressions. Huang Jifeng glanced at his companion then asked, "Miss Yi isn't from Linhai?" Mo Chenga nodded. "Correct." The three people looked at each other. There seemed to be pleasant surprise in their eyes. In the end, it was still Wei Ziming who spoke. His attitude was very enthusiastic. "I really didn't expect Miss Yi to be an outsider. There are very few outsiders in Linhai, so it's also difficult for us to leave. Miss Yi, how did you come to Linhai?" Mo Chenga smiled faintly. "I came through a transporting formation." "A transporting formation?" The three people exclaimed in surprise. Soon afterward, Huang Jifeng said anxiously, "Miss, do you know where there's a transporting formation that connects Linhai and Kunwo? It's not Bichuan Court's transporting formation, right?" "You've misunderstood." Upon seeing their reactions, Mo Chenga felt more confident. "I came through a random transporting formation outside. I didn't come through a fixed transporting formation." "Oh." Hearing her words, the three of them revealed a look of disappointment at the same time. Mo Chenga swept her gaze over them, thinking in her heart. At first, the three of them thought she was a Bichuan Court disciple, so they were both enthusiastic and polite to her. Bichuan Court was very powerful in Linhai, so female cultivator statuses were much higher than male cultivators, so the three of them wanted to befriend her. However, because Bichuan Court's female disciples had always been arrogant, they basically wouldn't be so polite to outsiders, so the three of them were rather flattered. When she said she wasn't a Bichuan Court disciple, not only were the three of them not disappointed, but they were also pleasantly surprised. Mo Chenga speculated that it was very likely because Bichuan Court's female disciples all had very arrogant attitudes. In Linhai, almost all women with spiritual roots entered Bichuan Court, so it was rare for the three of them to meet a female cultivator they could get close to, so they were pleasantly surprised. In the end, when they learned she came from the outside, the first thing they asked was about the transporting formation. They were very disappointed when they heard there was no transporting formation in Linhai. Apparently, aside from Bichuan Court, the cultivators here were also trapped in this small area and couldn't leave, so they were very interested in the transporting formation. Judging from this, the cultivators in Linhai also had no way to leave, so it was probably impossible for them to return to Kunwu without going through Bishuan Court. Once she finished thinking, Mo Tiange showed just enough surprise on her face. Fellow Taoists, is there no transporting formation here? Or a way out? Huang Jifeng shook his head then said with a bitter smile, Miss Yi, we won't hide this from you. Linhai is a small place isolated in the eastern sea by demonic mountain range. To the west of us is the Devil Path and to the east is the sea, there's basically no way out. Mo Tiange looked even more surprised but there was also a hint of panic. Then what should I do? I still have to go back to Kunwu? Yu Yang, who'd been silent all this while, finally spoke. Miss Yi, you don't need to worry. If you were a male cultivator it would indeed be difficult, but you're a woman so you can ask Bishuan Court for help. Mo Tiange looked puzzled. Fellow Taoist Yu, what do you mean? Does Bishuan Court have a transporting formation to leave? Wei Ziming took over the conversation, but instead of answering he asked, Fellow Taoist Yi, do you know anything about the cultivation world in Linhai? Mo Tiange nodded. After I arrived here I asked around so I know a bit about it. Wei Ziming continued to say, Bishuan Court is the only cultivation group in Linhai, and it's also a cultivation group for female cultivators. At this point, a hint of embarrassment appeared on his face. Therefore, the status of female cultivators is slightly higher than that of male cultivators. Female cultivators can enter Bishuan Court as long as they have spiritual roots, but male cultivators like us have to either have very good spiritual roots or have a high cultivation level in order to be accepted as outer disciples by Bishuan Court. Moreover, only after performing dual cultivation with a female disciple can they be considered real Bishuan Court disciples. The same goes for cultivators from outside Linhai. In recent years, although there were very few foreign cultivators, they'd occasionally come across foreign cultivators. If they were female cultivators, they'd either be recruited by Bishuan Court or they'd pay a certain price for Bishuan Court to send them out of Linhai. Male cultivators, on the other hand, weren't so lucky. If they wanted to leave, they'd have to pay an even bigger price. Therefore, Miss Yi, you can ask Bishuan Court for help. Maybe they'll be willing to let you go. Mo Tiange was silent for a while before she nodded. I see. Thank you, fellow Taoists, for telling me. Huang Jifeng hesitated for a moment then asked, Miss Yi, your cultivation level is higher than ours, so presumably Bishuan Court will definitely recruit you. If you're only an individual cultivator in Kunwu, it'd be better for you to join Bishuan Court. Bishuan Court is a cultivation group for female cultivators, so they take great care of their female disciples. If you join Bishuan Court, you might even have a chance to build your foundation. Mo Tiange looked embarrassed. But I want to go back to Kunwu, Wei Ziming said. Miss Yi, if you don't want to join Bishuan Court and want to go back to Kunwu, I have to remind you first. At this point, he paused for a moment to confirm there was a sound-insulating barrier around them before he continued to say, Bishuan Court is very powerful in Linhai, they always mean what they say. If they really recruit you and you don't agree, it won't be good for you if you provoke them. Wei Ziming spoke very tactfully, but Mo Tiange could hear the warning in his words. Apparently her previous guess was right. Bishuan Court wasn't only powerful, but it was also very overbearing. They couldn't be offended easily. She thought for a moment then said with a smile, Thank you for reminding me, fellow Taoists. Are all fellow Taoists local cultivators? Could it be that you've never gone out? Huang Jifeng smiled bitterly. To be honest, miss, we're all from small local cultivation clans. Yu Yang exclaimed, Bishuan Court only has about 1,000 disciples, and there are only a few dozen foundation building cultivators. Is that so? Mo Tiange took this opportunity to ask, then does Bishuan Court have any core formation cultivators? Yu Yang nodded. Bishuan Court currently has 3 core formation cultivators. Oh, if that's the case, they'd be considered a medium or small cultivation group in Kunwu. 3 core formation cultivators wasn't considered much in Kunwu. Back then, Yunwu sect also had 7 or 8 core formation cultivators, but Yunwu sect was only a medium cultivation group. For a medium cultivation group like this, if they had nascent soul cultivators, they could develop into a big cultivation group. If they didn't, they could only maintain the structure of a medium cultivation group. Upon hearing her understatement, Wei Ziming and the others said in amazement, Bishuan Court isn't considered a big cultivation group in Kunwu? Then what are Kunwu's big cultivation groups like? Do they only count if they have nascent soul cultivators? Mo Tiange nodded. Correct. Not to mention big cultivation groups, even some medium cultivation groups with great influence in Kunwu all have nascent soul cultivators. I reckon there are about 50 to 60 nascent soul cultivators in all of Kunwu, and most of them are in the 7 big cultivation groups. The 7 big cultivation groups? Huang Jifeng said, I've heard that 6 of the 7 big cultivation groups in the celestial pole are in Kunwu. They're very powerful and there are also many nascent soul cultivators in their groups. Mo Chinga shook her head and said with a smile, how could there be many nascent soul cultivators? Reaching the nascent soul realm isn't that easy. Tiandao sect, which is known as the #1 cultivation group in the celestial pole, only has 7 nascent soul cultivators, and that's only when they were at their peak. 7 nascent soul cultivators. The 3 of them showed expressions of yearning. For them, nascent soul cultivators only existed in legends. It had been many years since a nascent soul cultivator appeared in Bishuan court. It was said that aside from the founder of the group, there was only one nascent soul cultivator 1,000 years ago. After that person passed away, no one else was able to advance to the nascent soul realm, and there weren't many core formation cultivators either. Miss Yi, can you tell us more about the 7 big cultivation groups? If their previous attitude was polite, then right now, it already carried a hint of closeness and flattery. Although the 3 of them were children of cultivation clans and Mo Chenga claimed to be an individual cultivator, they lived in Linhai while she came from Kunwu, so she had seen much more of the world than them. Mo Chenga smiled. Of course it's nothing. The 7 big cultivation groups in the celestial pole are Tiandao sect, Xianqing school, Gujin sect, Zhengfa sect, Biyun sect, Lingshou school and Danding school. Among them, Zhengfa sect is located in the northernmost glaciers and has only one branch in Kunwu. Tiandao sect is known as the #1 cultivation group in the celestial pole and has the largest number of disciples, about 6 to 7,000 aura refining disciples. While Mo Chenga told them about the outside world, she also slowly mentioned Bishuan court. Seeing how straightforward she was, the 3 of them also told her about Bishuan court without holding anything back. Linhai wasn't very big, it was only a big city with tens of thousands of fishermen and farmers living around it, so Bishuan court's scale wasn't very big. Including the outer disciples, Bishuan court's total number of disciples barely reached more than 1,000. There were 30 to 40 foundation building cultivators, 3 core formation cultivators, and a nascent soul cultivator that hadn't appeared for a long time. Among the 3 core formation cultivators, one was in the middle stage of the core formation realm while the other 2 were in the early stage. Bishuan court's conduct had always been very overbearing. Because they were the only cultivation group in the area, it was inevitable that they would be arrogant and would often treat individual cultivators with a high and mighty attitude. Wei Ziming sighed. Unfortunately we can't go out. If we could, we'd definitely find a cultivation group and cultivate diligently. How could we possibly be bullied by a group of women? Mo Chenga looked up at him. Fellow Taoist Wei, do you think you're being bullied by women? Realizing he said something wrong, Wei Ziming promptly smiled and said, Miss Yi, please don't misunderstand. It's just that Bishuan court's conduct is indeed a bit overbearing. Usually their words are the law in Linhai, so I'm just a bit. Mo Chenga smiled and said faintly, so what if Bishuan court isn't a cultivation group for women? As long as it's powerful, it's inevitable that it'll be overbearing. Women aren't the only ones. Yes, Missy is right. Wei Ziming smiled apologetically. I misspoke. Mo Chenga waved her hand. It's nothing. She paused for a moment then sighed. Not to mention anything else, the founder of Bishuan court is really amazing. Women in cultivation are always trapped by their emotions and aren't decisive enough. It's already very rare for this founder to be able to establish such a foundation here. These were her heartfelt words. There were also cultivation groups for women in Kunwu, but none of them were as powerful as Bishuan court. Most of them were just small cultivation groups under the control of others. Bishuan court dominated the area. Although this was due to the terrain, it wasn't easy for them to establish such a cultivation group. That's true. Huang Jifeng's eyes shone with admiration. Although we don't like Bishuan court's way of doing things, no one in Linhai city is dissatisfied with the founder of Bishuan court. Not only Huang Jifeng but even Yu Yang also nodded. Brother Huang is right. The founder of Bishuan court is the beacon and idol in the hearts of cultivators in Linhai city. Mo Chenga was quite interested. Fellow Taoist, can you tell me about it? Huang Jifeng said, to talk about Bishuan court's founder, we have to start from the origin of Linhai. 100,000 years ago, the righteous path and the devil path fought a great war in the celestial pole. In the end, the devil path was defeated and moved to the north of Demonic Mountain, never setting foot in Kunwu again. The Devil Path moved to the northeast and operated in the mountain range to the north of Demonic Mountain. This part of the mountain range was covered with dense forests, undulating hills, and the terrain was complex. Coincidentally, there was such a small area in the Eastern Sea, which happened to be sandwiched between this mountain range and the Eastern Sea, becoming an isolated area. To the east was the sea, to the west was the mountain range where the Devil Path was active, and there were no roads to the north or south. The people of Linhai lived like this for tens of thousands of years, completely losing contact with other places in the celestial pole. Cultivation techniques were incomplete, resources were scarce, and there were no high-level cultivators. Even if there were very talented people, it was very difficult for them to achieve anything. Even pill concocting and tool refining were slowly lost. Occasionally, some cultivators accidentally came to Linhai and passed down some cultivation techniques and the Tao of pill concocting and tool refining. Huang Jifeng took a sip of tea, then went on to say, about 10,000 years ago, a female cultivator also accidentally came here. Unlike those people, her cultivation level was very high. She was a nascent soul cultivator. At that time, even foundation building cultivators were rarely seen in Linhai. There were only one or two of them left. A nascent soul cultivator suddenly came, so all the cultivators in Linhai naturally respected her. That was Bishuan Court's Grandmaster, Primordial Lady Bishui. We said Primordial Lady Bishui was amazing not because she established Bishuan Court here. With her identity as a nascent soul cultivator, it was too easy for her to establish a cultivation group here. What was amazing about her was that not only did she establish a cultivation group, but she also established Linhai Town and even built a transporting formation, allowing us people in Linhai to finally go to other places in the celestial pole through the transporting formation. Correct. Wei Ziming nodded. The reason why it's a cultivation group for female cultivators is because Primordial Lady Bishui rescued a group of female cultivators who were used as human furnaces by Kunwu cultivators and established Bishuan Court with them. I see. Mo Chenga muttered. No wonder female cultivators were respected in Bishuan Court while male cultivators had low status. So there was actually such a reason. That being the case, not only was Primordial Lady Bishui worthy of admiration, but the other Bishuan Court disciples also weren't domineering. Their seniors were once used as human furnaces by male cultivators, so they naturally didn't treat male cultivators well. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga even felt a bit of admiration. It really wasn't easy for these female cultivators to become independent. Chapter 192. After she finished listening to Wei Ziming and the others, Mo Chenga asked for a room in Azure Cloud Building. When the manager of Azure Cloud Building heard she wanted to stay here for the time being, he even prepared a small courtyard for her. Obviously, cultivators enjoyed a lot of benefits in Linhai Town. Because of this, Mo Chenga felt her previous deduction was a bit rash. Although Bishuan Court was powerful and controlled non-sect individual cultivators, it also gave them a lot of benefits. In any case, the terrain here was special, so it wasn't up to a foreign cultivator like her to judge Bishuan Court's actions. Originally, the three of them competed to invite her to their clans as a guest, but Mo Chenga politely declined. She wanted to leave Linhai Town as soon as possible and return to Kunwu. It was better not to get involved with the clans here. Bishuan Court was powerful here, so it would be troublesome if she violated their taboo. Through Wei Ziming and the others' conversation, Mo Chenga gained a general understanding of Linhai's situation. According to them, Linhai Town was Bishuan Court's world. Cultivators in Linhai couldn't bypass Bishuan Court no matter what they wanted to do. For Mo Chenga, as long as Bishuan Court controlled the only transporting formation connected to the outside world in Linhai, they would always have to deal with them. However, she had to think carefully about how to deal with them. Wei Ziming and the others once said that in the beginning, Bishuan Court's transporting formation wasn't limited to its own disciples. If individual cultivators wanted to use it, they could use it as long as they paid enough spirit stones or other valuables. Linhai had been isolated from the outside world for generations, so it lacked spirit stones and valuables. Individual cultivators often had to use all their savings to use the transporting formation. However, no one objected to this because the transporting formation itself consumed a lot of spirit stones. If they didn't accept valuables, Bishuan Court would simply suffer a loss. Later on, Bishuan Court started asking for more and more valuables until no individual cultivator could afford it. From then on, the transporting formation became Bishuan Court's exclusive use. Up to now, if individual cultivators wanted to use it again, Bishuan Court would offer a sky-high price to make those individual cultivators retreat. After learning about this, Mo Chenga had several ideas. The first method was to directly state her identity. With Xianqing School's name, Bishuan Court would presumably have to give them some face. Nevertheless, Bishuan Court was different from cultivation groups in Kunwu after all. Linhai's terrain was special, so they were the only group in Linhai. Even if Xianqing School became the #1 cultivation group in the Celestial Pole, it still wouldn't affect them. The second possibility was just like Wei Ziming and the others said, Bishuan Court saw her cultivation level was pretty good, so they'd probably try to recruit her. At that time, when she became a disciple of Bishuan Court, she'd naturally be able to request to use the transporting formation. But if she did that, she'd inevitably made a simple matter complicated. She originally just wanted to borrow the transporting formation, but in the end, it became a deception. If people from Bishuan Court found out about this, not only would they refuse to lend her the transporting formation, but they might even kill her to vent their anger. There was a third method. They said that there had been a small number of foreign cultivators who accidentally came to Linhai. If they were male cultivators, it would be more troublesome, but as for female cultivators, they would either be recruited or pay a certain price to be teleported away. She might as well act like she did just now, claiming to be an individual cultivator and saying she was willing to pay the price to borrow Bishuan Court's path. She thought for a long time but still couldn't decide which method to use. All of a sudden she changed her mind and couldn't help but laugh. In fact, this was only a very simple matter. Why did she think it was so complicated? Aside from Yen Ruoshu and her two companions, she basically had nothing to do with Bishuan Court. Yen Ruoshu and her two companions dying in Ziwei's Immortal's cave wasn't her responsibility. In other words, she had no enmity with Bishuan Court, so she didn't have to worry about them making things difficult for her. Regardless of whether she was a Xianqing School disciple or an individual cultivator, Bishuan Court was a cultivation group for female cultivators. Judging from the tone of Wei Ziming and the others, they wouldn't be too harsh on female cultivators who didn't belong to their group. She could just openly tell them the truth. Why did she have to rack her brain to think of a foolproof excuse? In the end, she'd encountered too many problems, so she always wanted to avoid danger and ended up going headfirst into a dead end. How could there be foolproof things in this world? She was still a human now, not an immortal, and she wasn't even a high-level cultivator. She couldn't even sense the mandate of heaven. She also wasn't smart enough to take every possibility into account. She just had to be careful when handling things, but it was basically impossible to avoid all risks. With that thought in mind, Mo Chenga already made her decision. Since she had no choice but to go through Bishuan Court, she'd better go and ask for help. In addition, in Ziwei's Immortal's cave, she and Taoist Fangjing once divided the dead people's belongings. Among them were Yen Ruoshu's and her two companions' belongings. She had to hide them well when she went to Bishuan Court. The less trouble, the better. This kind of adventuring together couldn't be explained clearly, so it was better not to talk about it. After resting in Blue Cloud Building for a day, the next day, Mo Chenga went to Bishuan Court's shop in Linhai Town, Blue Water Pavilion, according to the shopkeeper's directions. Mo Chenga stepped into this small shop, which looked completely the same as Immortal's shop, and her gaze swept over the shop. This shop wasn't big. It only had 2 storefronts. However, although it was small, it had everything it needed. Cultivation techniques, medicinal pills, spirit tools, and materials all had counters for sale. There was even a place to receive goods. The people guarding the counters were all low-level aura refining cultivators. Mo Chenga noticed that all of them were male cultivators. Upon seeing her entering the shop, the low-level cultivators guarding the shop were all dumbfounded. However, someone quickly regained his composure and came to greet her. "This, senior?" This time, Mo Chenga suppressed her cultivation level to the early stage of the foundation building realm. After all, the late stage of the foundation building realm could be considered very high. Bishuan Court only had 3 core formation cultivators in total, so the late stage of the foundation building realm might attract the attention of the core formation elders. As for the aura refining realm, if her cultivation level was too low, she might be looked down upon. Although this person called her senior, he didn't dare to confirm it, so there was a hint of bewilderment on his face. In Linhai, aside from women with poor spiritual roots and no foundation, all female cultivators with some cultivation level were Bishuan Court disciples. The female cultivator before them was in the early stage of the foundation building realm, so logically speaking, she must be a Bishuan Court disciple. However, Mo Chenga didn't have the slightest symbol of Bishuan Court on her, and they also didn't recognize Xianqing School's uniform. Mo Chenga showed a faint smile, then said to that person, "Excuse me, is this Bishuan Court's shop?" Upon hearing her question, the shop assistant promptly nodded, then asked, Senior, may I ask who you are? Mo Chinga's expression was calm. I'm a Kunwu cultivator who came here by accident. I especially came to ask to see the manager of Bishuan Court. Upon hearing what she said, the other shop assistants stopped what they were doing and stared at her. It had been a long time since cultivators from other places came to Linhai, let alone a foundation-building cultivator who could be considered a high-level cultivator to them. Upon hearing what she said, the shop assistant who received her hurriedly said, I see. Senior, please wait here for a moment. I'll immediately ask the manager to come out and see you. Mo Chinga nodded with a smile. Thank you. Perhaps it was because her cultivation level was high enough, or perhaps it was because her attitude was amiable, but after the shop assistant asked her to take a seat, he dashed into the back hall. Before long, a middle-aged man in the 9th layer of the aura refining realm hurriedly came out behind the shop assistant. The middle-aged man immediately saw Mo Chinga sitting on the guest seat. He immediately walked towards her and said respectfully, I'm Luo Qianshan, manager of Bishuan Water Pavilion. Greetings to Senior. Mo Chinga stood up and saluted him back. Manager Luo doesn't need to be too polite. My name is Yi Xiaotian, and I'm a cultivator from Kunwu. I came here by accident and heard that your school has a transporting formation to leave, so I came to see you. Manager Luo had already learned the reason from the shop assistant. Originally this wasn't a big deal. Although Linhai was isolated from the rest of the world, from time to time foreign cultivators still came here by accident through various methods. Generally speaking, they just needed to report it to the school. Whether they could leave or not depended on whether the school was willing to lend them the transporting formation. However, the person in front of him wasn't only a female cultivator, but also a foundation-building cultivator. In a small place like Linhai, a foundation-building cultivator was already a high-level cultivator, so he didn't dare to neglect her. So it's Senior Yi. Manager Luo still had a respectful and courteous attitude. This is a big deal. Junior will definitely report it to the seniors of our school as soon as possible. Senior Yi, please come inside and sit for a moment. Mo Chinga nodded with a smile. Alright, sorry for troubling you. Luo Qianshan had a very good impression of her gentle and courteous manner, so he immediately respectfully invited Mo Chinga into the inner room to serve her tea. Senior Yi. After instructing his subordinate to report to the school, Luo Qianshan sat on the side and said, It's been a long time since there were foreign cultivators in Linhai. May I ask why Senior came to Linhai? Mo Chinga smiled. Apparently, Luo Qianshan came to inquire about her background, but that wasn't a big deal. Linhai was Bishuan Court's domain, so a foreign cultivator suddenly came and wanted to borrow the transporting formation. They naturally had to inquire about it. About this, to be honest, I'm also not very clear. She had already thought of an excuse for this. I originally went to a secret place to look for some fated chances, but I don't know what happened, but that secret place suddenly collapsed. Afterward, I discovered I was in Linhai. I see. Luo Qianshan couldn't tell whether what she said was true or false. He only felt that Mo Chinga looked calm and didn't have any suspicious points. Judging from Senior Ye's bearing, you don't seem to be an individual cultivator. May I know which famous cultivation group in Kunwu are you? That's easy. Mo Chinga smiled faintly. I'm a disciple of Xianqing School in Western Kunwu. Xianqing School? Luo Qianshan was horrified. He wasn't a small cultivator from one of those cultivation clans. As the manager of Bishuan Court's shop, he could come into contact with some of Bishuan Court's affairs, so he knew a lot more than them. Xianqing School was the second largest cultivation group in the Celestial Pole. Although Bishuan Court was very powerful in Linhai, it could only be considered a small cultivation group in Kunwu. It couldn't compare to a large cultivation group like Xianqing School at all. Upon hearing Mo Chinga say she was a cultivator from Xianqing School, Luo Qianshan's gaze suddenly changed. He was a bit frightened. Senior Yi is actually a senior from Xianqing School. I'm truly sorry for not recognizing you. Don't mention it. Mo Chinga waved her hand. I'm just an ordinary cultivator from Xianqing School. I really can't afford to receive such a big greeting from Manager Luo. Although Mo Chinga said that, Luo Qianshan didn't dare to slight her in the slightest. His tone was polite and his attitude was respectful. Especially when he saw that Mo Chinga didn't try to hide anything and answered his questions frankly, he didn't have any doubts about her at all. Before long, the shop assistant who went to deliver the news came back and reported. As expected, the manager of Bishuan Court was willing to see her. Mo Chinga secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Up until now there hadn't been any abnormalities. She hoped the manager of Bishuan Court could smoothly lend her the transporting formation. Chapter 193. When Mo Chenga walked out of Bishui Pavilion, a carriage was already waiting outside. Once Mo Chenga got on the carriage, Luo Qianshan respectfully saw her off. Senior Yi, a senior from my group is already waiting for you at the gate. Senior only needs to go, someone will receive you. In the car, Mo Chenga thanked him. Thank you, Manager Luo. Thank you. Luo Qianshan hastily returned her greeting. Soon after, the coachman cracked his whip, causing the horses to neigh and the carriage to move. Mo Chenga, who was inside the carriage, let down the curtain. She took advantage of the time the carriage was moving to enter a meditative state. She didn't bother to remember the route the carriage took. Up until now, Bishuan Court didn't seem to have malicious intentions towards her. If they did, there was absolutely no need for them to send a carriage to pick her up. Aside from expressing caution, this kind of secular method had no other use. After she entered a meditative state, about an hour passed by quickly and the carriage stopped. The coachman, who was also an aura refining cultivator, said respectfully from outside, Senior Yi, our group has arrived. Please get off the carriage. Mo Chenga opened her eyes. At that moment, someone had already lifted the curtain. Senior, please get off the carriage. It was a handsome youngster with a respectful attitude. Judging from his clothes, he seemed to be a part-time disciple, just like the coachman. Once Mo Chenga got off the carriage, she immediately saw the jade steps, the lofty monastery gate, and the two female aura refining cultivators waiting on the side. These two female aura refining cultivators were different from the coachman and the youngster who lifted the curtain. Their cultivation levels were relatively high. One was in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm, while the other was in the 8th layer. They didn't have the slightest bit of humility, and their clothes were relatively gorgeous with the same group's emblem on their sleeves and lapels. Mo Chenga noticed that the clothes of these two female cultivators were very similar to Yen Ruoshu's group of 3 whom she met in Ziwei's Immortal's cave. Their emblems were also the same. Upon seeing her getting off the carriage, the two female cultivators walked towards her with smiles on their faces. Are you Senior Yi? We're Bishuan Court's guest-receiving disciples. Greetings to Senior Yi. Since she was in Bishuan Court's territory, Mo Chenga politely returned their greetings. Mrs. You're too polite. I'm Yi Xiaotian. She keenly noticed that the two female cultivators seemed to be evaluating her. They looked at her and finally smiled at each other as if they were satisfied. One of them said, We've already reported Senior Ye's origin to the sect's elders. The sect leader heard that there's another guest from outside, and it's a foundation building senior, so he specifically ordered us to welcome Senior here. Oh. The two of them smiled and said, Senior Yi, the sect head is already waiting. Please come in. Mo Chenga nodded to express her thanks, then stepped into the main hall. However, the moment she stepped into the main hall, Mo Chenga was stunned. It wasn't because there was anything unusual about this main hall, but because there was only a middle-stage foundation building female cultivator sitting on the main seat. This female cultivator was about 27 or 28 years old. She wore gorgeous clothes and looked very charming. At first glance, she could tell she was a woman who was good at dancing. Mo Chenga was hesitant. The Bishuan Court disciple who led her and said their sect head was waiting here, but why was there only this foundation-building female cultivator? For a moment she didn't know what to say. Fortunately, the moment this female cultivator saw her, she stood up first, then said with a smile, Are you fellow Taoist Yi? Although Mo Chenga was hesitant, she didn't show it on her face. She just raised her hand to greet her. Yes, I'm Yi Xiaotian. Greetings to fellow Taoist. Upon hearing her name, the female cultivator also returned her greeting, then said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Yi is too polite. My name is Wei Haolan, and I'm the sect head of Bishuan Court. You're the sect head of Bishuan Court? Mo Chenga blurted out in surprise. She originally thought the sect head would be a core formation cultivator, so she was puzzled as to why a core formation cultivator wanted to see her. She never expected it to be a foundation building cultivator. Once she said that, Mo Chenga immediately realized she was being a bit rude, so she hastily greeted her again. I'm sorry, sect head Wei. I was being rude. Wei Haolan didn't seem to mind. She showed a faint smile, then stepped forward to help Mo Chenga up. I heard from my disciples that fellow Taoist Yi is a brilliant disciple of Shenqing School, a large cultivation group in the Celestial Pole. Presumably, your vision is also extraordinary. You never expected Bishuan Court would actually have a foundation-building disciple as the sect head, right? This can't be considered rude at all. This sect head Wei was gentle and amiable. Mo Chenga secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She was originally worried Bichuan court was too powerful and was used to being overbearing, but it seemed this sect head Wei was also a smart person. She treated guests with enough respect. After the two of them exchanged some pleasantries, Mo Chinga finally sat down in the guest seat. Soon after, an attendant served them tea. It was still a low-priced male cultivator. Apparently in this Bichuan court, women were indeed superior to men. Mo Chinga thought to herself. She was used to seeing those people in Kunwu always treating female cultivators as human furnaces, so she was truly carefree in Bichuan court. Fellow Taoist Yi. Wei Haolan symbolically took a sip of tea, then said to Mo Chinga with a smile, "Our Linhai town hasn't had any foreign cultivators for many years. May I know what kind of fortuitous encounter fellow Taoist Yi had? How did you come to Linhai town?" Upon hearing the question, Mo Chinga put down her teacup, then answered, "To be honest, sect head Wei, several months ago, I was ordered by my master to leave the mountain to travel. I happened to run into several fellow Taoists, so we went to a secret place to look for treasures. Unexpectedly, while we were looking for treasures, that secret place suddenly collapsed. I don't know what happened, but when I woke up, I was already in Linhai." Wei Haolan was puzzled. "Is that so?" "Correct. As for how I came here, even I don't know, so I don't know where to start." Upon seeing Mo Chinga's bewildered expression, Wei Haolan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Yi, it's already very fortunate that you were able to preserve your life and didn't suffer any serious injuries. Our Linhai is isolated from the rest of the world. In the past few years, foreign cultivators occasionally came here, but many of them suffered serious injuries and even lost their lives. There are all kinds of strange things in this world. We're still just beginners on the path to immortality, so there are some things we still can't understand." "That's right." Mo Chinga carefully thought about why she came to Linhai. The scenery of the land of Hiding Dragon changed every year. According to her speculation, there was probably some kind of secret technique hidden there. Every year it would attract a place to move to the land of Hiding Dragon, and the next year it would change again. This time it was very coincidental that she was transferred to Linhai. After putting this matter aside, Mo Chinga pondered for a moment, then simply asked frankly, "Sect head Wei, I heard in Linhai town, only your group has a transporting formation that connects to the outside world. Is that true?" Wei Haolan nodded. "Yes." Mo Chinga was delighted. She stood up and raised her hand. "That being the case, I'd like to borrow your group's transporting formation. Is that possible?" She paused for a moment, then added, "Of course, I'll give you some property as a fee for using the transporting formation." Wei Haolan didn't answer right away. Instead, she leisurely took a sip of tea, then said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yi doesn't need to be so polite. This matter of borrowing the transporting formation can be discussed." Although she said it could be discussed, Wei Haolan didn't continue. Instead, she picked up her teacup and continued to slowly drink her tea. Several years ago, Mo Chinga took over Shangqing Palace's affairs, so she had a general understanding of these ways of communication. Seeing Wei Haolan's attitude, she had a rough idea of what to do. It seemed this Wei Haolan was also quite skillful. She treated people kindly, but when it came to scheming, she wasn't polite at all. She didn't speak now because she had the transporting formation, so the initiative was always in her hands. If Mo Chinga wanted to borrow the transporting formation, she had to state her own conditions. Wei Haolan wouldn't agree until she was satisfied. Mo Chinga wasn't in a hurry. She imitated Wei Haolan and slowly drank her tea for a while before she put down the teacup and said faintly, "Sect head Wei, a straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. How about this? If your group is willing to lend me the transporting formation, I'll give you 1,000 spirit stones. What do you think?" For ordinary foundation building cultivators, 1,000 spirit stones was a huge sum. It was very difficult for individual cultivators to come up with this kind of money. Even for cultivation group disciples, if they weren't good at saving money, they also wouldn't be able to come up with that kind of money. After all, foundation building cultivators had a lot of income, but their expenses were also high. However, Wei Haolan only raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yi, you're worthy of being a cultivator from a big cultivation group. I'm not even willing to part with 1,000 spirit stones." Although that was what she said, Mo Chinga could also hear that she wasn't very satisfied. She pondered for a while, then said, 1,500 spirit stones. Although the transporting formation consumed a lot of spirit stones, it usually only required several mid-grade spirit stones to be used each time. In other words, several hundred spirit stones were enough. With 1,500 spirit stones, she could earn at least 1,000 spirit stones. Nevertheless, Wei Haolan still shook her head and didn't say anything. Obviously, she wasn't very satisfied with this price. Chapter 194. How could Mo Chenga not know Wei Haolan was raising the price? However, they had the transporting formation, so they had nothing to fear. She stared at Wei Haolan and said the next price, 2,000 spirit stones. Wei Haolan's gaze finally wavered, but she didn't agree immediately. Instead, she smiled at Mo Chenga and praised her. Fellow Taoist, he is really generous. 2,000 spirit stones to borrow the transporting formation is really generous. Mo Chenga looked at her and said faintly, but sect head Wei doesn't like it, right? Wei Haolan saw Mo Chenga's displeasure, but she still said with a smile, of course not. Although I'm the sect head, Bichuan Court is only a small cultivation group. To be honest, I can't afford 2,000 spirit stones. It's just that this transaction isn't very cost-effective for the cultivation group. Mo Chenga raised her eyebrows. Does sect head Wei think it's cost-effective for me to hand over all my belongings in exchange for the transporting formation? I don't dare. Wei Haolan still had a faint smile on her face. She said unhurriedly, however, as a disciple of a large cultivation group, fellow Taoist, ye must be very wealthy. A small cultivation group like ours can't compare to you. 2,000 spirit stones. I'm afraid fellow Taoist, ye doesn't really care. For elite disciples of large cultivation groups like her, 2,000 spirit stones indeed wasn't much. Not to mention she was now Lord Taoist Jinghe's advanced inner disciple, so her rations weren't inferior to core formation cultivators. Even Luo Fengxue, who was a core formation cultivator's favorite disciple, could afford several thousand spirit stones. Wei Haolan was worthy of being the head of a cultivation group. Although Bichuan Court wasn't a large cultivation group, she knew roughly how much the disciples of large cultivation groups had. Mo Chenga regretted confessing her cultivation group, but on second thought, if she didn't have Xianqing School as her backer, she might have extorted even more. Sect leader Wei. She pondered for a moment, then said straightforwardly, we're not merchants, so haggling over the price is really boring. You should just give me a price. As long as I can afford it, I won't waste my breath. Okay. Wei Haolan seemed to be waiting for her to say that. She clapped her hands and said with a smile, fellow Taoist Yi, you're a straightforward person. That being the case, I won't refuse any more. Wei Haolan paused for a moment, but she didn't directly state a price. Instead, she said slowly, does fellow Taoist Yi know what kind of situation Bichuan Court is in Linhai? Mo Chenga nodded. Since I arrived here, I've gained a rough understanding of the situation. Your school is the only cultivation group in Linhai, and it also controls the only transporting formation leading to the outside world. It can be said that your school is the most powerful. That's right, one sect dominates. Wei Haolan had a proud expression on her face as she said those words. However, after saying those words, she sighed. However, there are many hidden dangers behind the dominance of a single sect. Mo Chenga was bewildered. Your group has a core formation cultivator overseeing things, there aren't any powerful enemies on your side, and all the cultivators in Linhai are under your group's control. Where would the hidden danger come from? Wei Haolan showed a bitter smile. Fellow Taoist Yi, you might not know this, but although Bichuan Court's development is smooth, Linhai's only so big. Our spirit veins can't be considered top-notch, and we're even more lacking in resources. Even if we don't have any strong enemies, it'll still be very difficult for us to grow. Mo Chenga was also aware of this. Zhengfa sect, one of the 7 great cultivation groups, was also facing this problem. The size of a sect's territory was the fundamental problem that restricted its development. Aside from moving, there was no other way to solve this problem. But on the other hand, with Linhai's special terrain, Bichuan Court basically didn't have to worry about anything if it didn't vainly try to grow. They had exclusive access to resources, and the whole of Linhai was their world. Even though their population was small, it was still possible for them to train a few cultivators. Accepting disciples was easy, so all the cultivators in Linhai racked their brains to enter Bichuan Court. The same was true for male cultivators. With manpower and wealth, as long as they didn't make any stupid moves, the group would be able to develop steadily. In other words, given the current scale of the group, being the sect head of Bichuan Court was the best choice. Seeing as Mo Chenga didn't respond, Wei Haolan could only continue to say, of course, in the beginning Bichuan Court was nothing more than a shelter for a group of women who had a hard life, given by the sect's founder. We didn't want to be like those big cultivation groups who wanted to develop their influence and train many high-level disciples. But in any case, if Bichuan Court wants to pass on its legacy, some things are indispensable. Emo Chenga nodded. So, what does sect head Wei want from me? Emo Chenga wasn't an idiot. Wei Haolan's words definitely meant she wanted to exchange some resources from her, perhaps medicinal pills or magic tools. Seeing as Emo Chenga understood what she meant, Wei Haolan didn't beat around the bush and said bluntly, "Fellow Taoist, ye came from Kunwu. Kunwu is rich in cultivation resources, so presumably fellow Taoist ye doesn't lack medicinal pills and materials." Emo Chenga held the teacup and smiled. "I beg to differ, sect head Wei. There's no cultivator who doesn't lack medicinal pills and materials. The current era isn't like the distant past era where spiritual objects were everywhere. Although Kunwu is rich in resources, it's still a lot more people." "That may be the case, but it's much better than Linhai." Wei Haolan didn't feel displeased. She looked at Emo Chenga and said with a stern expression, "Fellow Taoist ye, although we don't have many spirit stones, we can still find spirit stone veins in Linhai. However, Linhai and Kunwu have been separated for too long. Although we often send disciples to study outside, our pill concocting and tool refining skills have been declining, and we're short of resources. If fellow Taoist ye wants to borrow the transporting formation, you can use medicinal pills and materials to exchange for them. You can also use pill concocting and tool refining skills." At this point, Wei Haolan finally stated her real price. After revealing her trump card, she stared at Emo Chenga. Although the initiative was in her hands, she also urgently needed these things. Upon hearing what Wei Haolan said, Emo Chenga put down her teacup and tapped her fingers on the table as if she was thinking. Upon seeing her like this, Wei Haolan asked again, "Fellow Taoist ye, these are still within your means, right?" Emo Chenga glanced at her then nodded. "Sect head Wei, I like to be frank, so I'll be frank with you. I don't have many tool refining materials on me, so I'm afraid I can't exchange them with you. My tool refining skills are also mediocre, so I can't teach you anything. But as for medicinal pills, I do have some on me. I also found some spiritual plants during this trip, and I can also take out some common pill recipes. I just don't know if sect head Wei will be satisfied with them." Wei Haolan looked delighted. "It seems fellow Taoist Yi is proficient in pill concocting. To be honest, we can buy common spiritual plants and pill recipes, but the art of pill concocting really isn't easy to learn. If fellow Taoist Yi can teach our disciples how to concoct medicinal pills, I'll save you the transporting formation fee. In addition, if fellow Taoist Yi has high-grade medicinal pills, we're willing to exchange them with specialties from the Eastern Sea." "Is that so?" Emo Chenga was somewhat tempted. "I do have some pill concocting skills, but I don't know if sect head Wei will be satisfied with them." Wei Haolan smiled. "Whether you're satisfied or not, you'll know once you try." Emo Chenga pondered for a while then nodded. "All right." Now that they'd more or less reached an agreement, Emo Chenga followed Wei Haolan to Bichuan Court's concocting room. Although Bichuan Court was a small cultivation group, its concocting room wasn't small. It occupied an entire main hall. Upon entering the concocting building, Emo Chenga saw about 7 or 8 pill furnaces inside. In front of each pill furnace were several busy female disciples, and there were also some low-level male cultivators assisting them. Emo Chenga swept her gaze over them. These female disciples were all in the aura refining realm, but their pill concocting techniques seemed very unskilled. Even the better ones could barely concoct early-stage foundation-building medicinal pills like soul-strengthening pills. Emo Chenga shook her head inwardly. No wonder Wei Haolan was in such a hurry. This kind of pill concocting level simply wasn't good enough for a cultivation group with more than 1,000 disciples. She reckoned the failure rate of concocting foundation-building pills was very high, and soul-strengthening pills were the only foundation-building pills. It wasn't easy for disciples to build their foundation, and cultivating after they built their foundation was even harder. Once the two of them entered the concocting room, a disciple immediately came to greet them. "Sect head." Wei Haolan nodded then asked, "Is your martial uncle Xia here?" The disciple answered, "Sect head, martial uncle Xia is concocting pills in the inner room." "Has it started?" "Not yet." After thinking for a moment, the disciple added, "If sect head wants to see martial uncle Xia, it's not too late if you go now. Martial uncle Xia is heating up the furnace, she'll be concocting pills in a moment." Wei Haolan nodded then said to Emo Chenga, "Fellow Taoist Yi, my junior martial sister Xia Qing is the #1 expert in concocting pills in the group. She's currently concocting a furnace of soul-solidifying pills. Let's go and take a look." Soul-solidifying pills were basic medicinal pills taken by core formation cultivators. Based on what Wei Haolan said, this Xia Qing should be a foundation-building female cultivator, so it wasn't easy for her to concoct medicinal pills for the core formation realm. Apparently, Mo Qiange still underestimated Bichuan Court. A concocting master at this level should be able to support a small or medium-sized cultivation group like Bichuan Court. However, Mo Qiange's pill concocting skills were no longer the same as before. Now that she had a lot of spiritual plants in her virtual sky world to waste, her pill concocting skills also improved in a straight line. For her, concocting soul-solidifying pills was very easy. The two of them walked through the hall and entered a separate concocting room. This concocting room was very spacious. There was only one huge concocting furnace inside, but there were no fewer aura refining cultivators inside than the ones in the hall outside. Mo Qiange discovered that this concocting furnace wasn't like the ones in the hall outside, which were operated by the disciples concocting pills using their Dantian real fire. Instead, this furnace used earthly fire as its concocting fire, and the earthly fire was very pure. As they walked further inside, they saw a female cultivator with slightly messy hair standing behind the huge concocting furnace. She was muttering to herself as she calculated the amount of materials. She looked so focused that it was as if she wouldn't raise her head even if the sky collapsed. Mo Qiange was a bit surprised. This female cultivator was actually in the foundation building realm. Was she Wei Haolan's junior martial sister Xiaqing? Her current appearance indeed resembled a pill-concocting maniac. She didn't even raise her head to look at the two foundation building cultivators who came in. Fellow Taoist Yi, Wei Haolan said to Mo Qiange with a helpless expression. This is my junior martial sister Xiaqing. Once she starts concocting medicinal pills, she doesn't care about the heavens or the earth. Please don't take offense. Mo Qiange showed a faint smile. On the contrary, I think your junior martial sister is very respectable. Those who concentrate wholeheartedly on one thing are all very respectable. Compared to those ignorant female cultivators in Kunwu who only knew how to show off their clothes and jewelry, Mo Qiange liked the female cultivators in Bichuan Court much more. Wei Haolan, for example, was smart and capable, planning for the future of her group. Xiaqing, on the other hand, was wholeheartedly devoted to concocting medicinal pills and even forgot to take care of herself. Mo Qiange had seen too many female cultivators who didn't want to make progress. She often felt sorry for their misfortune but also angry at their lack of ambition. Why did female cultivators have such a low status in the cultivation world? Sometimes status wasn't given by others, it was earned by oneself. If you didn't know how to work hard, didn't know how to fight for it, and just because others gave you a certain position, you cried and wiped the earth, was that useful? Didn't you see that in this world there were still female cultivators who formed their nascent souls and held their own? Therefore, it wasn't that female cultivators had a low status, it was just that there were too few high-level female cultivators. Chapter 195. Junior Martial Sister Xia. Wei Haolan shouted. The alchemist named Xiaqing just frowned and waved her hand impatiently. Then she continued to mutter her calculations. Wei Haolan once again felt helpless. She said to Mo Qiange, Fellow Taoist Yi, do you mind waiting for a moment? I really can't do anything to her. Mo Qiange chuckled. Concoctions masters all have some eccentricities. I'm not in a hurry. Sect head Wei, please do as you please. Wei Haolan smiled apologetically and ordered a disciple to prepare a seat. The two of them sat and chatted for a while before Xiaqing suddenly stood up and shouted, All right, start the furnace and start concocting pills. Junior Martial Sister Xia. Wei Haolan seized this opportunity and shouted again. Xiaqing finally heard her this time. Scratching her head, she turned around and asked, Oh, Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, what's the matter? Her tone sounded like she was swatting away a fly. Mo Qiange couldn't help but chuckle. In fact, this Xiaqing was quite delicate and pretty. If she could tidy herself up, she could also be considered elegant and pleasant. However, she was so slovenly. Her hair was messy and her clothes were crooked. If it weren't for her temperament as an immortal cultivator, she would have been regarded as a beggar. Wei Haolan pulled Mo Qiange over. Let me introduce you. This is a cultivator from Shenqing School in Kunwu, fellow Taoist Yi Xiaotian. Xiaqing frowned. She wasn't curious about Mo Qiange's identity at all, so she just casually raised her hand and said, Greetings, fellow Taoist Yi. Without waiting for Mo Qiange to return the greeting, Mo Qiange immediately asked Wei Haolan, I'm busy here. Why did you bring people here? Mo Qiange's words were stuck in her throat, so she could only listen to what Wei Haolan had to say. Wei Haolan said, Didn't you say there's no one to compare notes with in alchemy? Fellow Taoist Yi is proficient in the art of pill concocting, so I specially invited her to discuss pill concocting techniques with you. Upon hearing what Mo Chenga said, Xia Qing's attitude immediately changed. She pulled Mo Chenga's hand incomparably affectionately. Fellow Taoist Yi, do you know how to concoct medicinal pills? Mo Chenga lowered her head to look at her hands, which had already turned gray from being stained by something. She resisted the urge to pull her hand back and answered flatly, I know a little. Just a little? Xia Qing asked. Do you know how to refine soul-solidifying pills? Did he know how to refine the heart-shielding powder? Where were the beauty pills? Or the dustless pill? Some of them. Mo Chenga discreetly pulled back her sleeves and shook them. If I have the materials I can concoct them, but the success rate isn't very high. Wow, you even know how to refine pills? Not bad. Xia Qing continued to ask. The success rate isn't very high, but how high is it? 30%? 40%? About 50%. If I'm in a good state, I can go up to 60%. With a success rate of 50% to 60%, one could already be considered a master apothecary. In the beginning, Mo Chenga wasn't very talented in pill concocting, but she had piles of spiritual plants to squander, so her success rate slowly increased. Therefore she came to a conclusion. There was no such thing as talent. If there were countless spiritual herbs to refine, most people could become pill refinement masters. 60%. Xia Qing shouted. Even Wei Haolan's eyes lit up. Come. Xia Qing immediately pulled Mo Chenga's sleeve towards the concocting furnace. I have ready-made materials here. Try concocting a soul-solidifying pill. Mo Chenga withdrew her sleeve from Xia Qing's hand and looked at Wei Haolan. Fellow Taoist Wei, this. Wei Haolan was also very excited when she heard that Mo Chenga's success rate could reach up to 60%. She hastily said, Fellow Taoist, just try it. If you succeed, we'll lend you our transporting formation for free as long as you teach junior martial sister Xia your pill concocting secrets. Mo Chenga nodded. Okay. Concoctions masters rarely taught their pill concocting secrets to others, but Mo Chenga didn't rely on pill concocting to earn spirit stones, so she didn't have to worry about this. Besides, her pill concocting secrets were just some experiences she summarized after concocting for a long time. There was nothing special about them. Even if she taught them to Xia Qing, it would only save her some time. In any case, she found Xia Qing pleasing to the eye, so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable teaching her. Seeing that Mo Chenga agreed, Xia Qing immediately waved her hand. Bring the materials. Yes, the numerous aura refining disciples answered and brought the spiritual plants they were responsible for. Mo Chenga skimmed through them. The materials were very ordinary. Among them, the main ingredients of soul-solidifying pill, purple slough grass and snowlingji mushroom, were only 500 years old. As for the other ingredients, needless to say, some of them were only about 100 years old. In fact, this wasn't a big deal. Soul-solidifying pill was a basic medicinal pill for core formation cultivators, so it only had two requirements for the materials. Purple slough grass and snowlingji mushroom had to be more than 500 years old, and there weren't many requirements for the other ingredients. However, the older the spiritual plant, the better the medicinal pill would be. With the materials in front of her, the efficacy of this soul-solidifying pill could only be said to be SOSO. In fact, she was the only one who thought this way. In this world, spiritual plants that were more than 1,000 years old were already hard to come by. Even core formation cultivators generally only use spiritual plants that were more than 500 years old. Who would be like her, who had a private medicinal garden where they could concoct medicinal pills as they pleased? Furthermore, almost all the spiritual plants were more than 1,000 years old. Wei Haolan, who keenly noticed Mo Chenga's slight frown, looked at the materials and asked, Fellow Taoist Yi, is there a problem with these spiritual plants? It's nothing. Mo Chenga gently shook her head. After examining all the spiritual plants, she signaled an aura-refining disciple to bring over an empty tray, put a clean cotton cloth on it, and began to take the amount she needed. She simply weighed them with her hand, then directly put them on the cotton cloth. She didn't need to weigh them at all. Very soon she finished taking several dozen portions of materials. After wiping her hands clean, she said to the aura-refining disciple holding the tray, Put them over there. Be careful not to mix them together. The aura-refining disciple complied and cautiously brought the tray over. Xia Qing came over, exhaled, and praised, Fellow Taoist Yi, let's not talk about other things, but you actually didn't need to calculate or weigh them, yet you were able to divide the amount you needed. This is something I can't do. Amazing. Emo Tiange just smiled. After concocting a lot of medicinal pills, I'll have an idea. This was the truth, there was nothing fancy about it. But then again, there were very few people like her who didn't need to worry about materials at all, so there were also very few people who could do this. Of course, it wasn't that there weren't any. Almost all great concoctions masters in Kunwu could do this, let alone great concoctions masters. They were either cultivated by cultivation groups or had great cultivation clans as their backing. From this point of view, concocting was achieved by piling up spiritual plants, but it could also be said that it was achieved by piling up spirit stones. Unfortunately, Bishuan Court was located in Linhai. Even though there was a transporting formation connecting it to Kunwu, they still weren't rich enough to buy a pile of materials and waste them. Wei Haolan's face was also filled with admiration. She thought to herself, Xianqing School isn't a pill concocting cultivation group, and this fellow Taoist he also doesn't look very old, but she actually has such superb concocting skills. It's clear that Kunwu is really full of talented people. It's worthy of being the Celestial Pole's cultivation holy land. After she finished preparing the materials, Emo Tiange stared at the already heated pill furnace. She muttered to herself for a while, then reached out to feel the temperature of the earth fire and the thickness of the pill furnace. This pill furnace was much thicker than the purple wooden tripod she used, and the earth fire was slightly inferior, so she had to start the furnace a bit later. She would have to constantly use her divine sense to monitor the temperature. After she finished checking everything, she cleaned her hands and said, "Open the furnace." Xia Qing, who had been impatient for a long time, hastily waved her hands. "Open the furnace. Open the furnace." With a great ant urging them from behind, these aura-refining disciples didn't dare to be negligent. They hastily arranged the materials, poured the clear spring water, then worked together to lift the furnace lid. Frankly speaking, this pill furnace was a lot worse than Emo Tiange's purple wooden tripod. After all, the purple wooden tripod was once used by a deification cultivator, so even if it was only once, it still wasn't an ordinary item. This pill furnace was just a magic tool, it couldn't even be considered a magic weapon. This wasn't strange at all. With Bishuan Court scale, they only had 3 core formation cultivators in total, and they weren't good at concocting pills, so it was naturally very difficult for them to have a top-grade pill furnace. However, this pill furnace couldn't be considered too bad. It was worth at least 100 spirit stones, which was much better than the common goods Emo Tiange used in the beginning. After she gave the order to start the furnace, Emo Tiange didn't immediately start concocting pills. Instead, she closed her eyes and meditated. Although the amount had long been divided, when she concocted pills, she still had to increase or decrease the amount according to the changes in the furnace fire, so she needed to be completely focused and couldn't be distracted in the slightest. The other 2 foundation building cultivators and several dozen aura refining cultivators didn't dare to make any noise. They were all used to seeing Xia Qing concocting pills. With Xia Qing's temper, if anyone dared to make even the slightest noise while she was concocting pills, they would immediately be driven out of the concocting room and demoted to a part-time disciple. The disciples who could stay here were all experienced and knew the rules very well. After she calmed down, the pill furnace was also hot enough. Emo Tiange first mixed the heavenly sunflower powder and purple sloe grass, then threw them into the pill furnace and said, "Close the furnace." The several aura refining disciples immediately followed her instructions. Emo Tiange closed her eyes and sent a strand of her divine sense into the pill furnace. She sensed the purple sloe grass slowly melting into a pool of purple liquid while the heavenly sunflower powder dissolved into the purple sloe grass liquid. As the temperature of the pill furnace rose, these 2 kinds of materials mixed into one. Gradually, they couldn't be separated from each other anymore and became a new substance. The temperature in the furnace was already boiling. The purple sloe grass liquid quickly evaporated and gradually turned into lumps of wheel-shaped objects. Emo Tiange opened her eyes. "Open the furnace." Xia Qing didn't need to remind them again. The aura refining disciples moved very quickly and immediately lifted the lid of the pill furnace. This time, Emo Tiange only kept a few kinds of materials and threw most of them inside. Once again she ordered them to close the pill furnace. She then sat motionlessly as if she was meditating. In the beginning, Xia Qing could still stare at the pill furnace, but she didn't dare to use her divine sense. This was because when concoctions masters concocted pills, their divine senses had to constantly pay attention to the inside of the pill furnace. If they were disturbed by other people's divine senses, they might make mistakes. Xia Qing thought the 2 of them were both in the foundation building realm, so even if their divine senses were strong and weak, the difference wouldn't be too big, so they would be disturbed. What she didn't know was that Mo Chenga's divine sense couldn't be affected by cultivators in the same realm as her. Because she cultivated the soul-refining art, her divine sense was more tenacious than ordinary cultivators and wouldn't be easily affected. In the end, perhaps because it was time for Xia Qing to concoct pills, Xia Qing couldn't sit still anymore. However, she didn't dare to disturb Mo Chenga, so she stood up and paced left and right, occasionally gesturing at Wei Haolan. Wei Haolan couldn't understand the meaning of her gestures, so she could only nod randomly. Finally, when Xia Qing was about to lose her patience, Mo Chenga opened her eyes and ordered for the third time, "Open the furnace." When the aura-refining cultivators opened the pill furnace, she first poured clear spring water, then put in the remaining spiritual plants. "Okay, cover it. You can rest now." The aura-refining cultivators waiting on the side heaved sighs of relief, but they didn't dare to make any noise. They just retreated and waited quietly. This time they waited even longer than the last time. Xia Qing couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Yi, isn't it too long?" This time, Mo Chenga wasn't meditating, but when she heard what Xia Qing said, she just shook her head. "Rest assured." After saying that, she didn't say anything else. Xia Qing paced back and forth anxiously behind her. Mo Chenga calmly stared at the pill furnace, neither too fast nor too slow. Chapter 196. Just as Xia Qing was about to rush over and open the furnace for her, Mo Chenga finally stood up. The timing of opening the pill furnace at the end of alchemy was very particular. If the furnace was opened too early, the pill aura would disperse quickly and the pill would be unstable. Even if the pill was formed, the medicinal efficacy would be reduced. However, if the furnace was opened too late, it wouldn't work either. If too much of the pill fire was sealed in the pill, it would form pill poison and affect the quality of the pill. If the furnace was opened too early or too late, the pills would not be formed. Therefore, a brilliant alchemist must control the opening time of the furnace, not too early nor too late, so that the medicinal effect of the pill would be the highest, and at the same time, try to avoid the pill poison as much as possible. This was not something that was easy to grasp. Even an alchemy grandmaster would make mistakes sometimes. Other than concocting more pills and trying to figure it out, there was no other way. Right at this moment, Mo Chenga was concentrating her senses. All of a sudden she made her move. A wisp of spiritual aura flew out and rolled up the lid of the pill furnace. Hot steam spread out and a sweet fragrance filled the air. There were a few medicinal pills lying at the bottom of the furnace. The color was clear and each one was plump. Mo Chenga heaved a sigh of relief. Actually, with her skill in alchemy, it was still impossible for her to refine soul-solidifying pills every time she refined them. When she was at her worst, she had refined 10 pills in a single furnace, but not a single one was successfully refined. This was the record she had in the 5 years she had been in seclusion. She didn't expect that all 5 of them would become pills this time. She thought that there would be at least 2 that failed. After that, she didn't need to do anything as Xia Qing had already done it for her. Xia Qing pounced over and grabbed the pills at the bottom of the furnace. She touched and smelled them, and in the end she even scraped off some powder and tasted it. Upon seeing Mo Chenga's appearance, Mo Tian suddenly felt very sympathetic towards the cultivator who would take these medicinal pills in the future. It should be one of the 3 core formation cultivators from Bichuan Court, right? It wasn't easy for them either. The pills they took might have been tasted by someone else. Xia Qing grabbed Mo Chenga and anxiously shouted, "Fellow Taoist Yi, teach me. Teach me. You're too amazing. You refine these pills much better than me. Look at the quality, look at the luster." Ever since she set foot on the path to immortality, Mo Chenga had seen many female cultivators. Among them there were naive female cultivators like Murong Yen, lively female cultivators like Luo Fengxue, amiable female cultivators like Han Qingyu, cold and arrogant female cultivators like Wei Jiaxi, and even many female cultivators who were as vain as mortal women. However, he had never seen someone like Xia Qing who was so focused on one thing and so fanatical that she didn't care about anything else. She considered herself to be a cultivation maniac. Other than cultivating, refining pills, and studying array books, she had no interest in anything else. However, she was still a normal cultivator. She was good at scheming. She was definitely not like Xia Qing, who was slovenly and didn't care about the ways of the world, wholeheartedly pursuing the realm of pill concocting. Such a madman was rare even among male cultivators. She had never seen such a person before. Fortunately, Wei Haolan was still present. She pulled Xia Qing back and scolded, "Junior Marshal Sister Xia, aren't you afraid of scaring fellow Taoist Yi? If you want to learn from her, we can just ask her to stay for a few more days. What's the rush? Alright. Xia Qing finally regained her composure. She hastily apologized to Mo Tiange. Fellow Taoist, I'm sorry. I was too anxious. It's nothing. I understand. Mo Tiange's gaze fell on Wei Haolan. Sect head Wei, can we conclude the matter we discussed before? Seeing Xia Qing's reaction, Mo Tiange felt she could take the initiative now. Bichuan Court held the only transporting formation, but she also had the pill concocting technique that Bichuan Court urgently needed. Everyone took what they needed. Wei Haolan's expression calmed down when they talked about proper business. She glanced at Xia Qing and said with a smile, of course. Fellow Taoist, how about we go and have a proper talk now? Mo Tiange understood and nodded. That'd be best. The two of them were about to leave together when Xia Qing pounced on them from behind. Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, you can't take fellow Taoist away. Xia Qing immediately pulled Mo Tiange behind her. Xia Qing glared at Wei Haolan like a hen protecting its chicks. Mo Tiange and Wei Haolan couldn't help but laugh. In the end, Wei Haolan comforted her. Junior Martial Sister Xia, rest assured. I'm looking for fellow Taoist because I want her to teach you pill concocting. If you want to learn fellow Taoist Ye's pill concocting technique, don't cause trouble. Really? Xia Qing's eyes were filled with suspicion. She looked at Wei Haolan, then turned to look at Mo Tiange. She then shook her head and said, Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, this isn't the first time you've schemed against me. This time Mo Tiange snickered. Aside from pill concocting, there was nothing else in Xia Qing's eyes. Mo Tiange could also guess Wei Haolan's temperament. Wei Haolan most likely put the sect's interests first. In that case, Mo Tiange wouldn't believe Wei Haolan hadn't schemed against Xia Qing. Wei Haolan sighed and said, Junior Martial Sister Xia, I schemed against you in the past, but when did I ever not support you in improving your pill concocting technique? Since fellow Taoist Yi is beneficial to your pill concocting technique, I naturally won't let her go. Xia Qing thought for a moment, then nodded hesitantly. Alright. You're the Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, so I'll listen to you. She then patted Mo Tiange's shoulder. Fellow Taoist Yi, don't run away. Let's compare notes first. Whatever you want, I'll ask Martial Uncle Qingyi to give it to you. I guarantee you won't lose anything. Mo Tiange nodded. Fellow Taoist Xia, rest assured. If your Senior Martial Sister agrees to help me, I'll definitely tell you all my pill concocting tricks. That's good. Upon hearing what Mo Tiange said, Xia Qing once again said to Wei Haolan in a daze, Senior Martial Sister, just agree to fellow Taoist Ye's request. Great concocting masters aren't easy to find. Even if you find one, they never tell anyone about their tricks, so I can't learn them. Wei Haolan felt a headache coming on. She nodded and said, I understand. You can go back now. Only then did Xia Qing let go of Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange smiled and once again cupped her hands to bid her farewell. With great difficulty, she held back her laughter and left with Wei Haolan. The two of them didn't talk on the way. After walking for a short while, Wei Haolan once again led Mo Tiange back to the main hall. She then ordered the part-time disciples to serve tea again and dismissed everyone else, leaving only the two of them in the hall. Ahem. Wei Haolan coughed, then glanced at Mo Tiange. Fellow Taoist Yi, since my junior martial sister already said so, I won't hide it anymore. If you want to borrow the transporting formation, that's no problem. As long as you teach my junior martial sister everything you know about concocting pills, you can come and go as you please. This time Mo Tiange wasn't in a hurry. She slowly sipped her tea, then said, Fellow Taoist Wei, for concocting masters, some things are secrets that can't be passed on. If I teach her everything, shouldn't you add a bit more bargaining chip? This isn't just 2,000 spirit stones. Even if you have spirit stones, you still can't buy the pill concocting secrets. Wei Haolan's expression darkened. Fellow Taoist Yi, do you want to raise the price? I wouldn't dare. Mo Tiange smiled faintly. I'm not someone who doesn't know how to appreciate favors. We've already reached a preliminary agreement before, but I just want to improve it a bit. Wei Haolan's expression finally became a bit better. All right. If fellow Taoist Yi has any other requests, please don't hesitate to mention them. As the sect head, I can still make the decision. Sect head Wei is straightforward. Mo Tiange clapped her hands. Wei Haolan forced a smile. Fellow Taoist Yi, please state your conditions first. Mo Tiange didn't speak right away. Instead, she muttered to herself for a moment. In fact, a small, remote cultivation group like Bichuan Court originally didn't have anything that could make her covet it. She had spirit stones. Although she wasn't as rich as the child of wealth, she had more than ordinary core formation cultivators. There was no need to mention medicinal pills, she had as many as she wanted right now. She also didn't lack magic tools. She even had several magic weapons and 2 late-stage foundation-building puppets. Presumably, there weren't many foundation-building cultivators who had as many treasures as she did. As for materials, this was the Eastern Sea region. Wei Haolan had long said that cultivation resources were scarce here. Sect Head Wei, to be honest, I don't need spirit stones or other items. I just need your group to provide me with one thing. Wei Haolan was puzzled. Aside from spirit stones and other items related to cultivation, what else did cultivators need? Safe, Emo Tiange said faintly. To tell the truth, Sect Head Wei, I was transported here together with an enemy. Although we weren't transported together, I'm not sure that person didn't arrive in Linhai. Wei Haolan's expression turned stern. Enemy? Fellow Taoist Yi, what's the cultivation level of your enemy? Right now he should be in the early stage of the core formation realm. He's a devil cultivator. The early stage of the core formation realm. Wei Haolan muttered to herself for a moment. She didn't ask how Emo Tiange became his enemy. Instead she said faintly, if that's the case, fellow Taoist, you can rest assured. As long as you don't leave Bishuan Court, I can guarantee your safety. Does that mean Sect Head Wei can guarantee my safety when I leave Linhai and return to Kunwo? As long as fellow Taoist Yi doesn't leave at will, there won't be any problem with us 3 core formation elders here. Emo Tiange smiled. All right. Since Sect Head Wei is straightforward, I'll also be straightforward. As long as your group guarantees my safety and allows me to smoothly use the transporting formation to return to Kunwu, I'll teach you everything I know about pill concocting without holding anything back. Hearing those words, Wei Haolan finally revealed a smile. Very well, then it's decided. Emo Tiange nodded. The two of them clapped their hands to make their vow. Using tea as a substitute for wine, they each drank a cup to signify that they'd reached an agreement. Now that they were done talking about business, Wei Haolan finally seemed to have the mood to relax. She slowly examined Emo Tiange, then asked with a smile, fellow Taoist Ye's appearance doesn't seem to be due to the effects of look-preserving pills. Presumably you're also very young, right? In fact, Emo Tiange had also taken look-preserving pills. However, based on the lifespan of foundation-building cultivators, she hadn't reached the age of aging, so she still had a sense of youthfulness to her. This was something cultivators who had taken look-preserving pills didn't have. Emo Tiange just said faintly, I only have my current cultivation level because my elders think highly of me. Although she didn't directly admit it, Wei Haolan understood what she meant. Fellow Taoist Ye is really young and promising. You're worthy of being a disciple of a big cultivation group. Emo Tiange smiled but didn't say anything. If this kind of conversation continued, it would turn into mutual flattery. She wasn't used to that. Since Wei Haolan was the head of a cultivation group, she was naturally shrewd. Upon seeing Emo Tiange's expression, she said, fellow Taoist, ye must be tired after concocting medicinal pills, right? We're not in a hurry to teach you pill concocting. How about I arrange for fellow Taoist Yi to rest first? Emo Tiange was indeed tired, so she took advantage of the situation and said, all right, I'll have to trouble Sect Head Wei. Wei Haolan waved her hand, then raised her voice to call out, guards. The 2 aura-refining female cultivators guarding the door stepped in, then bowed. Sect Head, what are your orders? Wei Haolan's expression changed when she faced her disciples. She was solemn and imposing. From today onward, Senior Yi will live in the VIP building. From now on, the 2 of you will serve Senior Yi. You mustn't neglect her in the slightest, understand? Upon hearing the Sect Head's solemn instructions, the 2 aura-refining cultivators didn't dare to be disrespectful. They hastily bowed and said, disciple understands. Wei Haolan nodded. That'll do. You can go now. Yes. After answering, the 2 female cultivators respectfully bowed towards Emo Tiange. Senior Yi, please follow Junior. Chapter 197. From then on, Emo Tiange stayed at Bishuan Court. Although Wei Haolan was quite scheming, she still treated Emo Tiange quite well. Not only did she send 2 female cultivators to take care of Emo Tiange's daily chores, but she also gave Emo Tiange a lot of Eastern Sea specialties such as spiritual fruits and other things for her to enjoy. On the second day after Emo Tiange stayed at Bishuan Court's VIP building, there was a continuous stream of guests. Xia Qing was always there. Early in the morning, she dragged Emo Chenga to the concocting room and asked her about pill concocting. When Emo Chenga returned from the concocting room, there were always other guests waiting for her. These guests were all Bichuan Court's foundation building female cultivators. When she asked why, they all said they heard Emo Chenga came from Kunwu, so they wanted to inquire about Kunwu and exchange some things with her. Although Linhai was lacking in cultivation materials, it was still close to the Eastern Sea, so there were some special items in the sea that couldn't be found on land. These things weren't the main raw materials for medicinal pills, but they had special effects. Reportedly, these Bichuan Court disciples only had a few chances to be sent to Kunwu or the Heartland to exchange for materials. Most of them wouldn't get the chance to go to Kunwu in their entire lives, so even if they obtained some materials that were rare for cultivators on land, they could only keep them in their hands. Now that they heard there were fellow cultivators from Kunwu, they all took out the things they had and came to exchange them for medicinal pills, spiritual plants, magic tools, and so on. Emo Chenga didn't lack medicinal pills, and she also had a lot of magic tools. Although she wasn't a bloodthirsty person, many cultivators died around her since the demonic beast riot began. Some were killed by her and some died because they were unlucky. She obtained a lot of magic tools from those unlucky cultivators, but she usually didn't lack spirit stones, so she didn't exchange them for money. Now she took them out and exchanged them for some strange materials with these female cultivators. Of course, she wouldn't take out the things she obtained from Yen Ruoshu and the others. Senior Yi. Emo Chenga was cultivating when she suddenly heard a voice outside. She pressed the space between her eyebrows, came out of the virtual sky world, and opened the defensive formation. What's wrong? Outside were two female aura refining cultivators assigned by Wei Haolan to serve her. Their names were Yi Lu and Yi Qiu, and they were a pair of sisters. In Bichuan Court, low-level male cultivators had to do some rather laborious and sporadic work, so this kind of personal work was usually done by the maids. Reportedly, Yi Lu and Yi Qiu didn't have good spiritual roots, so they were taken in as maids in the beginning. Of course, in a cultivation group for female cultivators like Bichuan Court, their status was much higher than that of low-level male cultivators. The two sisters were diligent, and their job was to serve the sect leader. Wei Haolan saw that they were diligent and capable, so she often took care of them. Right now, they were already in the 8th or 9th layer of the aura refining realm. If they could get their hands on a foundation-building pill, they might be able to reach the sky in a single bound. Emo Chenga recalled an In, the little girl she met in the fishing village. If she was also as hard-working as an In, her path towards immortality might not necessarily be hopeless. Upon hearing Emo Chenga's voice, Yi Lu came in. She bowed respectfully and said, "Senior Yi, the Secret Treasure Pavilion is currently holding an exchange meeting. The sect master heard that Senior Yi often exchanges items with the martial uncles in the sect, so he specially sent someone to invite you." An exchange meeting? Emo Chenga was astonished. She'd naturally heard about the exchange meeting. In the cultivation world, aside from opening shops and setting up stalls, there were also exchanges and auctions. However, the latter was generally used by high-level cultivators. When a cultivator's cultivation level was high, the requirements for the spiritual objects they needed were also high. Ordinary shops were opened by low-level cultivators, so how could they possibly have these things? Therefore, some powerful shops would hold auctions to sell some rare materials at the best price, and the exchange meeting was also born because of this. However, Bichuan Court didn't have that many high-level cultivators, so it could be completely like Xianqing School. They could just set up a group shop and let their disciples buy and sell items. There was no need for an exchange meeting. But on second thought, Emo Chenga remembered that in Linhai, spiritual objects were scarce and high-level cultivators were few, so it wasn't strange for foundation-building cultivators to exchange some rare items among themselves. "Senior Yi?" Seeing that Emo Chenga didn't answer, Yi Lu called her again. Emo Chenga regained her train of thought. "Then lead the way. While you're at it, tell me about this exchange meeting." "Yes." After leading Emo Chenga out of the VIP building, Yi Lu said while leading the way, "This exchange meeting is held every few months. Senior Yi also knows that Linhai doesn't have a lot of cultivation resources, especially medicinal pills. There aren't many good concoctions masters, and we're also short on a lot of spiritual plants. Fortunately, we're near the Eastern Sea and there are many demonic beasts in the sea. The beast cores of these demonic beasts can be taken directly, so..." "Beast cores can be taken directly?" Emo Chenga interrupted Yi Lu and asked. Yi Lu nodded. "Senior Yi, you don't know. However, taking beast cores requires some special methods to transform the spiritual aura inside. Moreover, different beast cores contain different spiritual auras, so you have to go to the exchange meeting to exchange for the beast cores you need. I see. Emo Chenga looked pensive. In Kunwu, beast cores had always been used to concoct medicinal pills. Every few decades during the demonic beast riots, the demonic beast corpses could be used to refine tools, and beast cores could be used to concoct medicinal pills. Beast cores contained a strange power, and if taken directly, it might lead to cultivation deviation. Even if it didn't happen, the spiritual aura inside the user's body would be contaminated with too many impurities. However, Mo Chenga didn't expect that Linhai actually had a method to transform beast cores directly. This was very valuable. She might be able to comprehend some new methods to use beast cores and better utilize their power. Senior Yi were here. Yilu led her to a building, then pointed at the attic and said, "It's up there. Senior can just go up. Junior's cultivation level isn't high enough, so I can't accompany Senior." Mo Chenga nodded. "Alright, thank you. I don't dare." Yilu bowed, then went to the side to stand with the disciples guarding the door. Mo Chenga went upstairs by herself. This attic was about the size of a side hall. There was a long table in the middle, and there were already about 20 cultivators sitting around it. All of them were in the foundation building realm, and there were even men and women among them. Mo Chenga was a bit surprised. Ever since she came to Bishuan Court, none of the male cultivators she'd seen were in the foundation building realm. Most of them were low-level cultivators in the second or third layer of the aura refining realm. Among the 20 or so foundation building cultivators in front of her, there were 5 or 6 male cultivators, which was indeed quite a lot. Mo Chenga thought about it. It wasn't like Bishuan Court didn't have male cultivators. She'd also heard that male cultivators with extraordinary aptitudes could be accepted as outer disciples. After they performed dual cultivation with female disciples, they could become official disciples. Seeing that these male cultivators all had relatively intimate female cultivators by their side, they must be these female cultivators' dual cultivation partners, right? Once Mo Chenga came up, Wei Haolan, who was sitting on the host's seat, immediately smiled and personally went to greet her. "Fellow Taoist Yi, you're finally here." Mo Chenga smiled back and even saluted Wei Haolan. She then turned around and saluted everyone. Upon seeing her salute, the cultivators sitting around the long table stood up one after another to return the salute. Wei Haolan pulled Mo Chenga's hand, then returned to the host's seat. She directly let Mo Chenga sit next to her, then said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yi, you don't have to be so reserved. Everyone here today is Bishuan Court's disciples, so this is just an internal exchange gathering." She then turned towards everyone and said, "Fellow disciples, this is fellow Taoist Yi from Kunwu. Fellow Taoist Yi is skilled in pill concocting, so if you have anything you want to exchange for, you must seize this opportunity." Everyone's gazes fell on Mo Chenga. A female cultivator even said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yi, you mustn't be stingy today. We're all counting on your medicinal pills." During this period of time, Mo Chenga had seen quite a few Bishuan Court female cultivators. Most of them were here, so she recognized about 10 female cultivators present. She smiled and said, "I've never been stingy. If fellow Taoists want to exchange for something, I definitely won't hide anything as long as I have it." Smiles appeared on everyone's faces when they heard what she said. If there was anything special about today's exchange gathering, it had to be fellow Taoist Yi from Kunwu. Everyone else was a Bishuan Court cultivator, so whatever they had was pretty much the same. However, this fellow Taoist Yi was a concocting master. No matter how good beast cores were, they still couldn't compare to medicinal pills of the same rank. At that moment, everyone started to calculate what they had to exchange for medicinal pills and how many they could exchange for. Wei Haolan swept her gaze over everyone, then said, "Alright, almost everyone's here. Let's start." Upon hearing her voice, everyone who was still talking quieted down. Wei Haolan said with a faint smile, "According to the rules, we usually take turns from left to right, but today we have an honored guest, so let's start with the honored guest. Does anyone have any objections?" Most of the people in this exchange gathering came for Mo Chenga, so how could they have any objections? Right now, several dozen pairs of eyes were staring at Mo Chenga. Seeing this situation, Wei Haolan smiled again. It seems everyone has no objections. It's settled then, let's start with fellow Taoist Yi. She then turned to Mo Chenga and said, "Fellow Taoist Yi, you also know we all want to exchange medicinal pills with you. How many medicinal pills do you have to exchange?" Mo Chenga thought for a moment, then started to take medicinal pills out of her Chenkuan bag. As she put the jade bottles on the table one by one, the cultivator's eyes became brighter and brighter. After taking out about a dozen jade bottles, Mo Chenga stopped. These are probably all I have. A few days ago, fellow Taoists exchanged for quite a lot, so these were concocted by me on the spot. Even Wei Haolan's eyes brightened when she saw more than a dozen bottles of medicinal pills. Even in Kunwu, medicinal pills weren't cheap. Every year, they sent disciples out to purchase medicinal pills, but there weren't many foundation-building cultivators who used them. Fellow Taoist Yi, someone couldn't help but ask, what are these medicinal pills? Mo Chenga opened the bottles one by one. These are spirit-cleansing pills, these are restorative panaceas, these are heart-clearing pills, these are look-preserving pills, and the rest are soul-strengthening pills. They're all medicinal pills that foundation-building cultivators can take. She concocted these medicinal pills using the common spiritual plants she bought from Shenqing School's shop. Her previous talk about concocting medicinal pills on the spot was for these cultivators to hear. She was only a foundation-building cultivator. Even if she came from a famous cultivation group and had pill concocting skills, it wouldn't be appropriate for her to take out too many medicinal pills. In particular, the materials she took from her virtual sky world couldn't be taken out to exchange with others. However, this many medicinal pills were already enough for the Bishuan court disciples trapped in Linhai. Fellow Taoist Yi, what do you want to exchange for? Right after she finished speaking, someone immediately called out impatiently and took out a pile of things. Look, I have all kinds of beast cores and some special spiritual objects from the Eastern Sea. Is there anything you want? Mo Chenga smiled and said, I'm fine with anything, but I only have these medicinal pills. I'm afraid they're not enough for everyone to exchange for. That's nothing, Wei Haolan interrupted. Fellow Taoist Yi, roughly how many medicinal pills do you have? Mo Chenga made a rough estimate. There were about 10 to 50 medicinal pills in each bottle. About 300. Then let's make an agreement. Martial sisters and junior martial sisters can exchange for 10 medicinal pills at most. What do you think? There were more than 20 people present, so if each person received 10 medicinal pills, they could pretty much exchange all the medicinal pills they had. Everyone had their own calculations and most of them agreed. However, there were also some people who had objections. What if there are more? Wei Haolan smiled and said, if there are more, I'll exchange them on behalf of the group and distribute them to you. What do you think? Chapter 198. After Wei Haolan made her decision, none of the foundation establishment cultivators had any objections, so the matter was settled. These cultivators' main purpose was naturally to exchange for soul-strengthening pills, which could be used to increase the cultivation of foundation establishment cultivators. Therefore, Wei Haolan first confirmed the number of soul-strengthening pills and distributed them to the cultivators present. The other restorative spirit pills and purifying spirit pills were also indispensable, but if there weren't enough monster core materials, then they could only give their quota to other cultivators. Originally, look-preserving pills were considered medicinal pills that weren't too popular in shops or in exchange fairs, but Bishuan Court's situation was special. There were about 20 female cultivators present, and they didn't have many look-preserving techniques to begin with, so nearly 30 look-preserving pills were instantly snatched away. There were even 2 female cultivators who started quarreling over a single medicinal pill. Shut up! Wei Haolan shouted when she saw this. Mo Chenga could see that Wei Haolan had quite a bit of prestige in the school. Although there were female cultivators whose cultivation levels weren't inferior to hers, they all quieted down the moment they heard her shout. Wei Haolan furrowed her brows slightly and said, Junior Martial Sisters, if all of you want the beauty pill, then let Junior Martial Sister Xiaqing learn the refining method from fellow Taoist Yi. When the time comes, you can exchange for it yourselves if you want it. This was indeed a solution to the root of the problem. The materials needed to concoct look-preserving pills that could preserve one's appearance for 10 years weren't considered rare. In Kunwu, even aura-refining cultivators who came from a cultivation group or clan could still afford it. If Xiaqing learned the concoction method, Bishuan Court would send people out every year to exchange for the materials. At that time, they could concoct several dozen pills and distribute them among their disciples. After hearing Wei Haolan's words, the 2 female cultivators were finally convinced. Finally, the medicinal pill was exchanged for by the other female cultivator. In the end, Mo Chenga already had a pile of strange materials in her hands. Among them, the most numerous were beast cores, which were colorful and had all kinds of attributes. Sadly, the highest level they had was only a 4th rank Yaodan. After all, a 5th rank Yaodan was equivalent to a completion stage cultivator. They were only at the foundational stage, so killing a 5th-rank Yao Dan was not easy. After exchanging the last bottle of medicinal pills, Mo Chenga was finally done. Just as she was about to heave a sigh of relief, she suddenly heard hurried footsteps coming from the stairs. It seemed like someone was running up the stairs in a hurry. Wei Haolan frowned in displeasure. Then, a white-clothed youth in the early stage of foundation establishment appeared at the door. "I'm sorry." The man stood at the door, his fair face flushed. "I'm late." Mo Chenga cast a glance at this person and was secretly shocked. Although she had never seen him before, she recognized him. More than a year ago, inside Wanderer Ziwei's Immortal's cave, the two female cultivators Yun and Lu were both trapped in the illusory formation. At that time, the one who appeared was exactly this white-robed male cultivator. She remembered that the two of them called the phantom Big Brother Tang. Almost all the female cultivators present had smiles on their faces when they saw this person. Only Wei Haolan's expression was slightly more serious, but she only coughed and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Tang, why are you so late? Fellow Taoist Ye's medicinal pills have all been exchanged." The male cultivator was dumbfounded. His gaze shifted to Mo Chenga, who was standing next to Wei Haolan. He was at a loss as to what to do. "Is done changing?" This time, the one who spoke was one of the male cultivators who rarely spoke before. His tone was ice-cold. "Junior Marshal Brother Tang, you're really leisurely. Sect head said before that the exchange meet must be punctual, but you're already 2 hours late. I have something to do." That person walked towards her in a somewhat awkward manner. Before he could say anything, he saw a female cultivator stand up and say, "Junior Marshal Brother Tang, I exchanged a lot of medicinal pills. I'll give you some." Before Junior Marshal Brother Tang could answer, another female cultivator said, "Senior Marshal Sister Lu, you didn't exchange a lot, right? If you give more, you won't have any left." She then turned towards that person and said with a smile, "Big Brother Tang, what were you busy with? There's no need to worry about medicinal pills. I exchanged a few more, so I'll give you half." This female cultivator didn't seem very old, and the way she addressed him was the same as Yun and Lu. Right after she finished speaking, a third female cultivator said, "Junior Marshal Brother Tang, you should exchange with me. Although I don't have enough medicinal pills, I still have a lot of metal element beast cores. Presumably, Junior Marshal Brother Tang needs them." Senior Marshal Sister Yang. The youngest female cultivator raised her eyebrows and shouted, "Who wants your beast cores? We're all here for medicinal pills at today's exchange meet. Big Brother Tang, it's a deal. In a moment we'll discuss how to exchange medicinal pills." The third female cultivator didn't have a good temper. When she heard this, she flipped her hand, pulled out a crescent moon-shaped blade-shaped magic tool from her waist, and slammed it on the table. "Junior Marshal Sister Hua, it's up to Junior Marshal Brother Tang to decide whether he wants the beast cores or not. You don't need to refuse on his behalf." This Junior Marshal Sister Hua was probably used to being arrogant. When she heard this, she didn't say anything else and also pulled out a flying sword from her waist. "Senior Marshal Sister Yang, I'm giving you face. If Big Brother Tang refuses you, you'll lose face." "You, enough?" Wei Haolan finally shouted, "There's an honored guest here, so how can you act like this? You don't need to worry about Junior Marshal Brother Tang's medicinal pills. Just now, we used the sect's name to exchange them for Junior Marshal Brother Tang." Senior Marshal Sister Wei. Unexpectedly, Wei Haolan's words didn't have any effect this time. Junior Marshal Sister Hua didn't admit defeat at all. She scowled and said, "You're abusing your position for personal gain. You're using the sect's medicinal pills as a favor." Wei Haolan's expression turned cold when she heard this. At that moment, Senior Marshal Sister Yang interjected, "Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head is the sect head. What's wrong with making this decision? Junior Marshal Sister Hua, aren't you meddling too much? You're not Junior Marshal Brother Tang's dual cultivation wife. You also don't have a share." Once she said that, Junior Marshal Sister Hua flew into a rage. "It's not up to you to decide whether I have a share or not. It's up to Big Brother Tang himself to decide. Right, it's up to him to decide. Junior Marshal Sister Hua, you're so fierce, yet you still want Junior Marshal Brother Tang to take a fancy to you? Don't worry." Mo Chenga watched the lively scene in silence. She originally thought Bichuan Court's female cultivators were much better than the jealous and ostentatious women outside, but it seemed it also depended on who they were. Today really broadened her horizons. There were actually people who quarreled like this because of a man. It seemed not only beautiful women were trouble, but beautiful men were also trouble. With that thought in mind, she cast a glance at the stunned white-robed male cultivator. His face was handsome enough, but his blank expression and bewildered look couldn't compare to Qin Shi's bearing in the slightest. She really didn't know what these female cultivators saw in him. Being handsome wasn't enough for a man, temperament and demeanor were more important. Take Qin Shi for example. He wasn't earth-shattering handsome, but his bearing was magnificent and outstanding. He was many times better than this junior martial brother Tang. All of you shut up. Wei Haolan's shout startled Mo Tiange back to her senses. She realized what she was thinking, so she felt vexed. She quickly restrained her thoughts and stopped letting her imagination run wild. Wei Haolan was obviously enraged. Her cold gaze swept over the several cultivators in front of her, and her expression darkened. Look at what you're doing. If you still have me, the sect head, in your eyes, shut up. You. Junior martial sister Hua seemed to want to say something, but Wei Haolan didn't look like she was joking. In the end, she reluctantly shut her mouth and sat back down. Wei Haolan looked at junior martial brother Tang with a cold gaze. Junior martial brother Tang, since you're late, I won't give you the medicinal pills. Yes. Junior martial brother Tang answered in a low voice. Mo Tiange thought inwardly. Even if Wei Haolan didn't give it to him, there would naturally be others who would be willing to exchange for it, right? This method was useless against this popular junior martial brother Tang. That'll do. Wei Haolan's expression softened. You can exchange freely now. Upon hearing what she said, the atmosphere finally relaxed. The more than 20 cultivators gathered together and whispered to each other. Wei Haolan turned around and forced a smile at Mo Tiange. Fellow Taoist Yi, please forgive us for our lack of discipline. Mo Tiange smiled faintly and said carelessly, Sect head Wei doesn't need to mind. I've seen this kind of thing many times in Kunwu. It's nothing. Really? Wei Haolan didn't seem to be in the mood to chat today. She said, now's the time to exchange freely, so I won't take up any more of fellow Taoist's time. Fellow Taoist, please help yourself. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Mo Tiange nodded. Sect head Wei, please. Wei Haolan smiled, then hurriedly stood up and left. As soon as Wei Haolan left, someone immediately went to look for Mo Tiange. It was junior martial sister Hua. Fellow Taoist Yi. Mo Tiange was displeased by this woman's domineering behavior, but her expression remained indifferent. Fellow Taoist, what's the matter? Junior martial sister Hua's eyes moved around as if she was observing whether other people were looking at them. She then asked in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Yi, you must have more medicinal pills, right? How about I add a few more things in exchange for them? If fellow Taoist doesn't want to exchange with other people, I can give you twice the amount of beast cores. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows slightly but didn't answer. Seeing that Mo Tiange didn't answer, junior martial sister Hua added, Fellow Taoist Yi, I'm the blood-related descendant of Elder Qingmiao from my group. If you're willing to exchange with me, I'll put in a good word for you in front of my clan's ancestor. At that time, when my ancestor sees you, he might be happy and reward you with good things. At first, Mo Tiange didn't think much of it, but when she heard what she said, she couldn't help but laugh in her heart. If she was an individual cultivator, she probably wouldn't give up the opportunity to make friends with a core formation cultivator. However, she clearly said she was a Xianqing school disciple who left the mountain to travel under her master's orders. Did an elite disciple of Xianqing school need to curry favor with a core formation cultivator from a small cultivation group like Bishuan Court? It seemed this junior martial sister Hua really had a backer, so she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Mo Tiange's wealth wasn't inferior to that of ordinary core formation cultivators, but based on her pill concocting skills alone, she was able to take out more than 10 bottles of medicinal pills at once. This Bishuan court elder most likely still wanted to make friends with her. Fellow Taoist Yi. Seeing that Mo Tiange still didn't answer, junior martial sister Hua raised her brows and said in annoyance, I'm willing to give you more beast cores. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Mo Tiange just cast a careless glance at her as if she didn't take what junior martial sister Hua said seriously. Fellow Taoist, you're thinking too much. I already said I only have this many medicinal pills. Even if I wanted to trade, I wouldn't be able to take them out. You, junior martial sister Hua was furious. She obviously didn't believe Mo Tiange, but in the end she was still unwilling to give up, so she threatened, You better think it through. Mo Tiange's tone was still indifferent. I really don't have any. Even if I wanted to trade, I wouldn't be able to. Mo Chinga wasn't worried at all about this unruly young Mrs. Words. Previously, Mo Chinga wasn't sure, but now that she had seen the internal situation of Bichuan Court, she was very clear that with her pill concocting skills, she didn't have to worry about Bichuan Court going back on their word. Besides, Wei Haolan didn't take this young Mrs. Word seriously, so what was there for her to be afraid of? Chapter 199. Following that, Mo Chinga continued to exchange some Kunwu spiritual plants for beast core materials, among which there was no lack of good stuff. In the end, that unruly young lady surnamed Hua didn't bother her, but she sat on the side with an unhappy expression and glared at her from time to time. Mo Chinga turned a blind eye to her. She wasn't a childish person, so how could she have the leisure to argue with a young lady who hadn't seen the world? Sure enough, there were female cultivators who were willing to exchange medicinal pills with that junior martial brother Tang. Mo Chinga noticed that the medicinal pills he exchanged for were actually more than the others, so much so that the other male cultivators looked unhappy. But there was nothing she could do about it. Who told him to be so charming? Before long, the exchange party was finally over. Mo Chinga bid farewell to several female cultivators she was familiar with, then went down the loft. Yilu was waiting for her downstairs. When she saw her, she came over and saluted her. "Senior Yi." Mo Chinga said, "Let's go back." "Yes," Yilu answered and continued to lead the way. Mo Chinga stared at Yilu and suddenly asked, "Is there a foundation building cultivator surnamed Tang in your school?" Yilu turned her head and answered, "Senior Yi, Tang is my school's Grandmaster Qingxi's surname, so there are many cultivators surnamed Tang in my school. May I know which one Senior Yi is talking about?" "Could it be that junior martial brother Tang is related to Elder Qingxi? I'm talking about a male cultivator in the early stage of the foundation building realm. He came in 2 hours late to the exchange party just now." Yilu paused, looked at her cautiously and said, "Senior Yi, you're talking about Martial Uncle Tang Shen, right? Martial Uncle Tang is Grandmaster Qingxi's great-great-grandson." "I see." It was no wonder that although this person was a male cultivator, his status wasn't low. Those female cultivators who called him Big Brother Tang must also have a family background, right? Doesn't he have a dual cultivation partner? Yilu looked at her cautiously and said after some deliberation, "Senior Yi, Martial Uncle Tang currently doesn't have a dual cultivation partner. However, his marriage has been discussed, but it hasn't been decided yet." Upon seeing Mo Chinga's reaction, Mo Chinga knew Yilu had misunderstood. However, she didn't explain and just nodded to show she understood. Yilu thought for a moment. She still seemed a little worried, so she said, "Our Grandmaster Qingxi really likes Martial Uncle Tang. Martial Uncle Tang grew up with Grandmaster Qingxi, so even though he's a male cultivator, his status in the group is very high." Mo Chinga could see this even if she didn't have eyes. She smiled and asked, "Are there many people who like him?" Yilu was somewhat startled by this straightforward question. She paused for a moment before nodding. "Yes, Martial Uncle Tang. He's handsome and he's also Grandmaster Qingxi's favorite junior. Who wouldn't like him?" This reason. Mo Chinga had to admit that although it was superficial, it was also the truth. There were also a lot of female disciples in Shenqing school who liked senior martial brother Shoujing. Didn't many of them also like him for the same reason? However, when she saw Yilu's blushing face, she asked curiously, "Are you the same?" Yilu was stunned by his question. She hurriedly looked left and right before saying in a low voice, "Senior Yi, don't talk nonsense. Because of Martial Uncle Tang's dual cultivation, the martial uncles in the sect often fight each other. You'll get me killed if you say that." "Often fight each other?" Mo Chinga couldn't help but be surprised. She didn't find it strange that these women fought each other at the exchange gathering, but it was strange that they fought each other often. Could it be that their elders didn't care? Yes. Perhaps this topic aroused Yilu's interest in talking. She carefully looked around and said, "There are a lot of martial uncles under the 3 grandmasters who like Martial Uncle Tang. There's Martial Uncle Yang and Martial Uncle Wen under Grandmaster Qingxi, Martial Uncle Hua, Martial Uncle Ming, and Martial Uncle Yun under Grandmaster Qingmiao, and Martial Uncle Lu under Grandmaster Qingyi. These are the ones who fight quite fiercely. There are also many who don't fight too fiercely. There's nothing we can do about it. There are very few high-level male cultivators in Linhai, and there are even fewer handsome ones." Upon hearing the 2 surnames Yun and Lu, Mo Chinga's gaze flickered. So these 2 people are Qingmiao and Qingyi's disciples? But this had nothing to do with her. She already planned to bury this matter in her heart and pretend she never knew about it. "Senior Yi." Seeing that Emo Chenga's gaze was wandering as if she was thinking about something, Yi Lu stammered. And? Emo Chenga was absent-minded. Biting her lip, Yi Lu finally made up her mind and said, "You'd better not meddle in Martial Uncle Tang's business. You're a cultivator from Kunwu, so the Grandmasters definitely won't let Martial Uncle Tang go with an outsider." Emo Chenga was stunned, but she couldn't help but laugh. Did Yi Lu also think she admired that Tang Xin? Although she had to admit that Tang Xin's appearance wasn't inferior to Qin Shi's, appearance didn't mean everything. "Rest assured, I don't have any other intentions." By the time she finished speaking, they had arrived at the VIP building, so she didn't say anything more and went inside. There were still some part-time disciples in the VIP building who did menial work. Yi Lu looked at them, then stopped talking and followed Emo Chenga inside. "Senior Yi, is there anything else?" Yi Lu hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Senior Yi, I heard your pill concocting skills are very brilliant. I want to ask, Senior, we want to exchange some things for medicinal pills. Is that possible?" Emo Chenga said, "I don't have any foundation building medicinal pills left, but if you want aura refining medicinal pills, I still have some." "Really?" Yi Lu was overjoyed. "Senior Yi, we only need aura refining medicinal pills. I have beast cores, spirit stones, and these." Knowing she still had medicinal pills, Yi Lu hastily pulled off the Chengkuan bag on her waist. After rummaging through a few things, she said, "Oh, Senior, wait a moment. Ichio still has some." She then ran out excitedly without waiting for Emo Chenga's answer. Emo Chenga shook her head with a smile, then laid a defensive formation again. She had to be careful when she was outside, especially when the people around her had ulterior motives. She had always been very careful. She made the people of Bichuan Court think she was useful, but she also didn't want to be useful to the point where they wanted to imprison her. However, she couldn't be careless, so she couldn't lack defensive formations. Before long, Yi Lu hurriedly ran back while pulling Ichio along. Both of them looked very happy. Once Ichio arrived, she also took out her Chengkuan bag and took out several kinds of things. "Senior Yi, please take a look. Can I exchange these for medicinal pills?" Emo Chenga gave them a cursory glance. Each of them had 100 or 200 spirit stones, several first-rank beast cores, and some scattered materials. In the end, they were aura-refining cultivators. The things they could take out were far inferior to those of foundation-building cultivators. Thinking Emo Chenga was dissatisfied, Yi Lu said somewhat shyly, "Senior Yi, our cultivation levels are low, so we can't get anything good. We saved these spirit stones for a long time." Emo Chenga looked up with a smile, interrupting her. "Alright, I'll exchange with you." She took out 4 jade bottles from her Chengkuan bag. These 2 bottles contain aura-nourishing pills, which aura-refining cultivators usually take. There are 30 pills in each bottle. These 2 bottles contain aura-converging pills, which are 10 times more effective than aura-nourishing pills. There are 10 pills in each bottle. The 4 jade bottles were placed on the table. Yi Lu and Ichio were overjoyed. According to the price in Kunwu, these things were worth 500 or 600 spirit stones. Medicinal pills were even more difficult to obtain in Linhai, so they were worth far more. After taking the medicinal pills, they couldn't wait to open them and take a look. The two of them thanked Emo Chenga repeatedly. "Thank you for your reward, Senior Yi." They naturally knew that the spirit stones and medicinal pills they gave were far less than the value of these medicinal pills. "No need to thank me. Just take it as a reward for taking care of my chores these past few days." Emo Chenga never thought she could get anything from these 2 female aura-refining cultivators. In any case, these were just leftovers from when she concocted medicinal pills for Jinji. Thinking of Jinji, she was in a daze for a while. By now, Jinji should have returned to Mount Taikong and finished the foundation-building pill test, right? She didn't know whether he passed or not. If he did, he should have entered closed-door meditation to build his foundation. She wasn't worried that Jinji wouldn't succeed. It was very rare for ordinary cultivators to succeed in building their foundation on the first try. With that master of hers watching over him, even if he didn't succeed, nothing would happen. Moreover, before she left, she secretly prepared several foundation-building pills and constitution-enhancing pills for Jinji, which she put in another small bag and told him to only take them out when he built his foundation. With the extra foundation-building pills she gave him, Jinji presumably had a great chance of successfully building his foundation. It was just that she didn't know whether he was obedient or not. Thinking up to this point, Emo Chenga suddenly wanted to go back. Although she'd only been out for more than a year, it felt like a long time had passed. She missed Jinji, missed her master, and missed that small immortal's cave. She'd been at Xianxing School for almost 20 years. She had relatives, a master and friends. She really considered Xianxing School her home. This feeling was very good. At least when she was injured or tired, she had a place to go back to. Yilu and Yiqiu thanked her profusely and left. Mo Qianga touched the space between her eyebrows and entered the virtual sky world, thinking about what to do next. Since she felt she'd been out for a long time, should she go back to Xianxing School? Generally speaking, from the late stage of the foundation building realm to the peak stage of the foundation building realm, it would take 30 to 50 years to cultivate smoothly. However, her aptitude was extraordinary now, and the medicinal pills she had were also much better than ordinary people's. Presumably, she would only need about 20 years. As for forming her gold core, it might take more than 10 years of preparation. As long as she wasn't too unlucky, her chances of forming her gold core shouldn't be too low. She was only 38 years old. If everything went smoothly, she would be able to form her gold core when she was around 70 years old. However, Mo Qianga was somewhat hesitant about this decision. If she went back and continued her closed-door meditation, it would be meaningless for her to deliberately suppress her cultivation level and prevent herself from advancing too quickly. For ordinary cultivators, the faster they reached core formation, the better. In today's cultivation environment, no matter how diligent a cultivator was, it was very difficult for them to form their gold core before the age of 100. Therefore, in the celestial pole, it was difficult for a few cultivators to form their gold core before the age of 100 even in 1,000 years. Those who could do it were all called geniuses. Because of this, her senior martial brother Shou Jing was able to form his gold core before he was 100 years old even though his talent was not outstanding. That was why he was so famous. However, Mo Qianga couldn't simply think of it this way. With a cultivation environment similar to the distant past era, geniuses from the distant past era, and countless medicinal pills, her spiritual aura grew very fast, and it was very difficult for her to encounter bottlenecks in realm breakthroughs. In this case, forming her gold core before she was 100 years old was almost certain. But after all, this wasn't the distant past era, so she would encounter problems that ordinary people wouldn't encounter. Her chief master once sighed in private that her senior martial brother Shou Jing formed his gold core too early. He was too young and his foundation was unstable. Fortunately, he liked to run around on his own and could be considered to have experienced a lot, so nothing bad happened to him. It was also because of this that her master repeatedly warned her that her mental state must keep up with him in order to form her gold core. Advancing her cultivation level too rashly wasn't a good thing. With this thought in mind, Mo Qianga became hesitant. It had only been a year, the time she spent traveling was still too short. Here are some pill recipes and I've written down some things that I need to take note of. Xia Qing's eyes lit up when she heard those words. She hurriedly received the jade slips, immersed her consciousness into them, and began to read them with great interest. That's all my tricks. I've already taught you all of them. In the future you can figure them out on your own. In the future your alchemy skills will definitely be better than mine. Mo Qianga felt that she had too many things she had to do. Cultivation was her priority, and the Tao of formations was her foundation. Only after that would she have to focus on concocting medicinal pills. Xia Qing, on the other hand, was wholeheartedly focused on concocting medicinal pills. Presumably, even if Mo Qianga had countless high-grade spiritual plants she could use, she still might not be able to surpass Xia Qing in terms of concocting medicinal pills in the future. Xia Qing hastily withdrew her attention from the jade slip. That's it? Fellow Taoist Yi, I still have a lot to learn and I can't be like you. Fellow Taoist Xia, my pill refinement skills aren't much better than yours, so this is all I can do. Moreover, concocting medicinal pills requires constant experimentation and contemplation. It's not something that can be done just by saying it. I can only help you avoid some detours. The rest will depend on you to do it slowly. Xia Qing had a very good understanding of concocting medicinal pills, so she couldn't help but nod when she heard what Mo Qianga said. You're right, Mo Qianga smiled. All right. Take your time to practice. I'll head back first. All right. Xia Qing couldn't wait to continue studying. After saying goodbye to Mo Qianga, she once again immersed herself in the jade slips. Seeing her like this, Mo Qianga shook her head and slowly walked out of the concocting room. Outside, Yilu and Yiqiu were already waiting for her. When they saw her coming out, they bowed. Senior Yi. The two of them had obtained a lot of benefits from Mo Qianga during this period of time, so they were even more respectful when they called her senior. Mo Qianga didn't directly go back like she usually did. Instead she said to them, I want to see your sect head. Ilu and Ichio glanced at each other. Ilu then said, Senior, please wait here for a moment. Junior will go and inform the sect head. Emochenga nodded. All right. Ilu bowed then left in a hurry. Ichio said, Senior, this place is quite far from the sect head's main hall, so Ilu might have to wait for quite a long time. How about Junior accompany Senior to stroll around first? Sure, Emochenga answered indifferently. Ichio then gave some instructions to the supervisor in charge of the concocting room, then led Emochenga to the garden. There were many women in Bichuan Court, so they also put a lot of thought into the scenery. Aside from the medicinal garden that every cultivation group had, they even arranged a garden with many exotic flowers and plants from the Eastern Sea. They were all very beautiful. Ichio led Emochenga to a gazebo next to the rockery, then said, Senior Yi, look at these flowers and plants. Although they aren't very rare spiritual plants, they can't be found anywhere else. As Emochenga stared at the flowers and plants in front of her, she couldn't help but praise the skillful hands of Bichuan Court's female disciples. She had never seen such a beautiful garden before. Among the cultivation groups in the cultivation world, aside from Bichuan Court, who else had the time to arrange a garden? It was already December now and the new year would be coming soon. It was the coldest season. However, this garden was protected by a formation, so it was still as warm as spring and hundreds of flowers were in full bloom. Ichio suddenly exclaimed, Isn't that Martial Uncle Tang? Emochenga followed Ichio's gaze. Wasn't that the popular young master Tangshin? Why did he seem to be avoiding their gazes? Upon seeing that they'd already noticed him, Tangshin's face flushed. Emochenga was secretly amused. This young Master Tang was really like a daughter from a noble family. He really liked to blush. But what was he looking at them for? Just as she was thinking, Tangshin clenched his teeth. He seemed to have made up his mind and walked towards them. Emochenga became even more confused. Ichio, who was next to her, whispered, Martial Uncle Tang? Before Emochenga could say anything, Tangshin was already in front of them. He looked at the two of them somewhat shyly before his gaze finally fell on Emochenga. He said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Yi. In the past few months in Bichuan Court, aside from going to the concocting room, Emochenga only occasionally accepted Wei Haolan's invitation to exchange some cultivation knowledge. She and Tangshin only met a few times and each time they didn't talk much. At most they just greeted each other. Because of that, Emochenga only nodded faintly. Fellow Taoist Tang, what a coincidence. Tangshin made an N sound then rubbed his hands anxiously. He then looked at Ichio again. Ichio was rather bewildered, but after Tangshin looked at her several times, she suddenly seemed to realize something. She was inwardly surprised, but her expression didn't change. She bowed towards the two of them and said, Senior Yi, Martial Uncle Tang, Junior still has something to do. Take your time and talk. I'll leave for a moment. Before Emochenga could respond, Tangshin already said impatiently, Go. Upon hearing what Tangshin said, Emochenga could only swallow her words and watch as Ichio slowly left the garden. It was already evening. There were no people playing in the garden, nor were there any part-time disciples working. The two of them were alone. Emochenga suddenly felt a bit funny. If this scene was seen by this young Master Tang's admirer, she'd most likely become Bichuan Court's public enemy tomorrow. She really didn't know what this young Master Tang wanted to say. Ichio left, but Tangshin still looked hesitant. Sometimes he rubbed his hands and sometimes he wiped his palms. Emochenga really didn't like a man acting like this, so she took the initiative to speak. Fellow Taoist Tang, is there something you need? Oh. Tangshin was startled back to his senses. He gulped, seemingly trying to calm himself down. Fellow Taoist Yi, let's sit down and talk. Emochenga glanced around. There was only a small table in the pavilion, so no matter how they sat, it would look too intimate. She said, It's the same if we stand and talk. What she said was obviously a refusal. She didn't want to appear intimate with him. Tangshin glanced at her with a bit of surprise, but his mood actually calmed down. Ever since he was a child, he had many admirers. Bichuan Court was a cultivation group for female cultivators, so the martial sisters he grew up with always wanted to get close to him. He also always thought female cultivators were the same. But now he could see that this fellow Taoist Yi didn't want to be too intimate with him, so he heaved a sigh of relief. As for what he wanted to say next, he also felt it would be easier for him to say it. I heard fellow Taoist Yi will soon return to Kunwu, right? Emochenga nodded. Yes. I've taught all my pill concocting skills to fellow Taoist Qing, so I'll be leaving soon. Then? Tang Shen cautiously glanced at her. Can I leave with fellow Taoist Yi? Emo Chenga was dumbfounded. She stared at Tang Shen for a while and only said faintly when she saw his face blushing again, Fellow Taoist Tang, as Elder Qingxi's beloved grandson, it shouldn't be a problem for you to leave Linhai, right? Why do you want to leave with me? Tang Shen glanced at her nervously, then said in a low voice, although I can leave at any time, great-grandmother doesn't feel at ease leaving me alone. However, the Marshall sisters in the group are too clingy, and the Marshall brothers aren't very friendly to me. Emo Chenga frowned and said in confusion, could it be that your ancestor isn't worried I might have bad intentions? I don't think fellow Taoist Yi is a bad person. Tang Shen looked up and glanced at her. I'm not afraid of fellow Taoist Yi laughing at me, but ever since I was a child, I've always been surrounded by a group of martial sisters, so I don't like to get along with women. But our Bichuan court is like this, all of us are female cultivators. I heard great-grandmother say Kunwu isn't like this, so I wanted to. Fellow Taoist Tang. Emo Chenga interrupted him. Please forgive me for speaking bluntly, but if you've never left Linhai and your ancestor is very fond of you, I can't leave with you. If something happened to you, I wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. It's not like that. Upon hearing her refusal, Tang Shen hastily said, I'm just not familiar with Kunwu, and fellow Taoist Yi is a disciple of a famous group, so I just want to go with you to Kunwu to take a look. I don't want fellow Taoist Yi to bear any responsibility. That's true, but would your ancestor think the same? Although she wasn't afraid of Bichuan Court's core formation cultivators, she also didn't want to take responsibility for herself. Fellow Taoist Tang, have you ever mentioned this to your ancestor? Tang Shen was rendered speechless. After a long time he finally shook his head. I want to wait for fellow Taoist Yi to agree, then I'll talk to great-grandmother. Upon seeing his appearance, Emo Chenga couldn't help but sigh. Fellow Taoist Tang, I don't want your ancestor to misunderstand that I'm abducting her beloved descendant, so you'd better explain it to her first. Besides, to be honest, with fellow Taoist temperament, it's better to have fellow disciples accompanying you. No matter how fellow disciples treat you, they'll always be more reliable than an outsider like me. Chapter 201. Fellow Taoist Yi. After being rejected, Tang Shen still didn't give up. However, he wasn't good with words, so he couldn't reason with her, so he could only walk around Emo Chenga in circles. Emo Chenga said helplessly, Fellow Taoist Tang, you'll get me killed like this. Tang Shen looked puzzled. Emo Chenga felt even more helpless. If this appearance was seen by others, this admirer of young Master Tang's would definitely hate her to the bone and might even fight her with a sword. With their jealous temperaments, she wouldn't be able to explain herself at that time. Big brother Tang? Just as she thought about this, the two of them heard a voice. Emo Chenga turned around and a frown immediately appeared on her face. It was actually Junior Marshal Sister Hua, young Master Tang's crazy admirer. Good things never come true, but bad things always do. Being seen by this person. Isn't she trying to kill me? This Junior Marshal Sister Hua was alone, but she aggressively approached fellow Taoist Yi. She stared at fellow Taoist Yi and asked condescendingly, Fellow Taoist Yi, what are you talking about with Big Brother Tang? He's the one talking, not me. Emo Chenga thought. She looked at Junior Marshal Sister Hua, who was half a head taller than her, and said flatly, Nothing. If fellow Taoist Hua wants to know, you can ask fellow Taoist Tang. Is that so? Her knife-like gaze cut Emo Chenga's face. Emo Chenga didn't doubt that this woman wanted to cut off the flesh on her face piece by piece. She smiled bitterly in her heart. Although Bichuan Court's female cultivators were strong, this wasn't a world where women were respected. Even a soft-hearted man like Tang Shen would probably prefer that Junior Marshal Sister Yun, she met in Ziwei's Immortal's cave, who liked to act coquettishly, right? Of course, strong women could also be cute, but if their strength turned into coercion, they wouldn't be cute at all. Emo Chenga didn't do anything shameful, so she wasn't afraid of her. She didn't back down and just said coldly, Does fellow Taoist Hua have anything else to say? Seeing that Emo Chenga didn't seem to have a guilty conscience, Junior Marshal Sister Hua frowned. Fellow Taoist Yi, I want to ask you what you want to do. Why are you talking to Big Brother Tang instead of studying pill concocting with Junior Marshal Sister Qing? Seeing that Emo Chenga didn't answer, Junior Marshal Sister Hua took another step towards her. Fellow Taoist Yi, I have to remind you, don't covet things that don't belong to you. Mo Chinga didn't feel weak under Hua Jiyu's intense gaze. Instead she felt like laughing. She was going to leave anyway, so there was no need for her to be afraid of anything. Thus, the corners of her lips curled into a sneer and she said, "Fellow Taoist Hua, you might as well remind yourself of this." This junior martial sister Hua obviously didn't expect Mo Chinga would refute her. Moreover, Mo Chinga's words were very rude, so she was stunned for a moment before she finally understood what was going on. She instantly became furious. "Yi Xiaotian, don't be so shameless." The angrier she got, the calmer Mo Chinga became. She even had a smile on her face. "Fellow Taoist Hua, haven't you always wanted to teach me a lesson? Why hasn't he made a move yet? Let me give you a piece of advice. A frog at the bottom of a well can't talk about the sea. With fellow Taoist Hua's temperament, it's fine if he stays in Linhai for the rest of his life, but if he goes to Kunwu one day..." You. Junior martial sister Hua's expression changed greatly when she heard Mo Chinga's rude words. In all of Bichuan court, aside from the 3 elders, no one else dared to talk to her like that. However, Mo Chinga's ice-cold expression made her feel a bit guilty. She also recalled what her elders said a few months ago. "You want to teach that Yi Xiaotian a lesson? Third girl, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." She was unconvinced. "Great-grandmother, she's just a Kunwu cultivator. What's wrong with teaching her a lesson? She still needs our help, but she's actually giving me that attitude." Her great-grandmother, Elder Qingmiao, flung her long sleeves and said coldly, "I said you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, but you still won't admit it. You've been spoiled rotten by your mother since you were a child. She's just a Kunwu cultivator? You were also there when your senior martial sister sect head made her report. Didn't you hear she's a Xianqing school cultivator? But she's just a foundation-building cultivator. What's so great about her? But she also said she left the mountain to travel under her master's order." Elder Qingmiao glared at her, feeling exasperated at her for failing to meet her expectations. Xianqing school can only accept disciples if they're in the core formation realm or above. Her master must be a core formation cultivator without a doubt. If she's favored, her status in the school won't be lower than yours. They have more nascent soul cultivators than us core formation cultivators. We can't afford to provoke them. She was dumbfounded and momentarily forgot to reply. Ever since she was born, she was the direct descendant of a core formation cultivator, so she was doted on. She never expected a foreign cultivator might have a status not lower than hers. Pulling herself back to reality, she stared at Mo Chinga, who was looking at her with an arrogant expression. She'd always used this expression on others. When had anyone ever treated her like this? She was so angry that she lost all reason and said angrily, "Who do you think you are? You actually dared to talk to me like that? Then who do you think you are?" Mo Chinga showed a faint smile, looking calm and composed. "My cultivation level isn't much and I don't have any strong points." "Do you really think you're amazing just because you have a core formation elder? Elder sister, with your attitude, you can forget about forming your gold core for the rest of your life. You can just stay in the early stage of the foundation building realm and dream until you die. You..." Without saying another word, she pulled out her flying sword and was about to stab Mo Chinga. Mo Chinga took a step back and stared at Tang Xin, who was staring blankly in the corner. "Fellow Taoist Tang." "Huh?" Tang Xin was at a loss. "Do you want to watch your junior martial sister attack a guest in the school?" Tang Xin didn't understand and hastily pulled out his magic tool. Junior martial sister Hua. Seeing that Tang Xin wanted to protect Mo Chinga, this junior martial sister Hua became even angrier. "Big brother Tang, you actually attacked me for her?" Tang Xin wasn't very confident, but in the end he still plucked up his courage and said, "But fellow Taoist Yi is our honored guest. How could you attack an honored guest?" "Honored guest?" This junior martial sister Hua sneered. "Have you ever seen an honored guest mocking their master? She's the one mocking me." "She's right." A dignified voice came from the side. The 3 of them turned around and saw a middle-aged woman dressed in plain clothes standing at the entrance of the garden. This woman seemed to be about 40 years old. She didn't have any wrinkles on her face, looked dignified and had an overbearing aura. Behind her were several maids holding cups. They were quiet and didn't make a single sound. Upon seeing this person, Tang Xin and this junior martial sister Hua were both dumbfounded. Soon after, the 2 of them hastily put away their magic tools and knelt to salute her. "Great-grandmother. Greetings to elder." The woman nodded slightly and walked over slowly. Her sharp gaze was fixed on Mo Chinga. Mo Chinga showed a faint smile, then cupped her hands and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Junior Yi Xiaotiang greets Elder Qingmiao." Upon hearing this, a hint of admiration appeared in the woman's eyes. She softened her tone and said, "No need to be so polite. You're a smart child." Mo Chinga lowered her hands, lowered her eyes and didn't say anything. This Elder Qingmiao also no longer looked at her. Her gaze fell on the two juniors kneeling on the ground. "Shiner, stand up." Tang Shin looked up anxiously, then answered with a low voice, "Yes. Thank you, Elder." This junior martial sister Hua also wanted to stand up, but when she raised her head and saw the stern gaze on her, she didn't have the courage. She bit her lip and continued to kneel. Some maids had already come to tidy up the mess in the pavilion, laid down the plates and cushions, then retreated to the side. Elder Qingmiao walked into the pavilion and sat down. She took the green tea the maids had just brewed and slowly took a sip. She then said, "Lin, you're already in your 40s this year, right?" Junior martial sister Hua, who was kneeling on the ground, answered in a low voice. The corners of Mo Chinga's mouth curled up. In fact, she called this woman Big Sister, just to annoy her. She didn't expect the woman to be older than her, so what she said just now wasn't wrong. She was already in her 40s, but she was still so unruly. Even if foundation building cultivators had a lifespan of more than 300 years, based on the way she lived, she wouldn't make any progress even if she lived for more than 300 years. In this lifetime, she shouldn't even think about advancing to the middle stage or late stage. Elder Qingmiao put down her teacup and her gaze turned cold. "You're already in your 40s, yet you still have the nerve to admit it. I've told you before, don't be so arrogant. You didn't listen to me." "But great-grandmother, but what?" Elder Qingmiao interrupted her and slammed the table. "Hua Yilin, do you think you can do whatever you want just because you have an old woman like me as your backer? Your mother didn't teach you well since you were young, and you don't know how to learn well. If you had the ability, you could have formed your gold core by yourself. But what do you have now? You're just an initial stage foundation establishment cultivator, yet you don't know how to improve." Mo Chinga stood on the side, watching as if this matter had nothing to do with her. So this junior martial sister Hua's name was Hua Yilin. What a waste of a good name. Hua Yilin, who was kneeling on the ground, pursed her lips and said nothing. Elder Qingmiao glared at her angrily. "What? Do you feel wronged? I think this little fellow Taoist is right. Just because he had a core formation elder, he thought he was really something. Can you rely on me for the rest of your life? Do you not want to make a realm breakthrough in the future? Last time, when I sent a disciple out, I should have thrown you out and let you go to Kunwu to broaden your horizons, lest you embarrass yourself in the future." His words were harsh, and they were truly ruthless. Hua Yilin's eyes reddened. She glared at Mo Chinga angrily, but she didn't dare to refute. Elder Qingmiao became even angrier. "What? You're not convinced? Fine, since there are guests here today, I won't lecture you too much. Go to the reflection temple and face the wall by yourself. You're not allowed to come out until I say you can." "Great-grandmother." Hua Yilin was so shocked that tears fell from her eyes. "I, quickly go." Elder Qingmiao glared at her mercilessly. Mo Chinga bit her lip, stood up and dashed away. Seeing her leaving obediently, Elder Qingmiao's expression finally relaxed. She then glanced at Tang Shin. "Shin, if there's nothing else, go and serve your great-grandmother. She was thinking about you just now." Tang Shin felt as if he was granted amnesty. He hastily saluted and said, "Yes." Then he hurriedly ran away. In the blink of an eye, aside from Mo Chinga, Elder Qingmiao and her maids were the only ones left on the scene. Mo Chinga's gaze flickered, but in the end she chose to remain silent. She used the method she used to deal with elders at Shanqing School. She lowered her head and stood quietly on the side. Elder Qingmiao didn't look at her right away. Instead, she took the handkerchief the maid gave her, carefully wiped her face, then raised her head to look at Mo Chinga. She looked at her very carefully and for a long time, but Mo Chinga's expression remained calm. Finally, Elder Qingmiao withdrew her gaze, picked up the teacup again and said slowly, "Little fellow Taoist, you really aren't simple." Chapter 202. This was Mo Chinga's first time meeting Elder Qingmiao. She'd been at Bishuan Court for several months, but all this time, it was always Wei Haolan and the other foundation building cultivators who received her. The three core formation elders had never met her. Of course, he was a core formation realm senior. Generally speaking, core formation cultivators cultivated in seclusion. Who would want to meet a junior who wasn't from their own sect? They weren't that free and they wouldn't do something that would lower their status. However, even if she hadn't met the 3 core formation elders, she was never worried Elder Qingyao would really harm her. She had taken over Shangqing Palace's affairs and helped Lord Daoist Jinghe make connections, so Mo Qingge was very clear about the twists and turns in the hearts of high-level cultivators and cultivation groups. In the eyes of high-grade cultivators, especially those who supported their sects, no matter how much they doted on their juniors, it was impossible for it to affect their view of benefits. Although they doted on their children, they couldn't mix these feelings with official business. Therefore, Hua Yilin's threat sounded like a joke to those in the know. But now, Elder Qingyao used this kind of tone to say something like that to her, which was thought-provoking. Not simple? What was not simple? Aside from her pill concocting skills in the eyes of Bishuan court cultivators, Mo Qingge was just an ordinary foreign cultivator. What Elder Qingyao said definitely wasn't a compliment to her pill concocting skills. Mo Qingge's expression didn't change. She merely raised her gaze slightly and said, "Senior, you flatter me." Elder Qingyao gently swirled the teacup in her hand but didn't drink it. She said slowly, "I wasn't praising you. Since Senior didn't say anything, Junior can only take it as praise." Mo Qingge still had a faint smile on her face. It seemed she didn't mind Mo Qingge's words at all. Elder Qingyao once again looked up at her with a sharp gaze. Mo Qingge didn't feel guilty at all and just let her look. Time passed bit by bit. Elder Qingyao even used the spiritual aura pressure of a core formation cultivator, but Mo Qingge still had a faint smile on her face. Although her smile was somewhat stiff and her forehead was even covered in sweat, she was still smiling in the end. After a long time, Elder Qingyao finally withdrew her spiritual aura pressure and asked coldly, "You? Were you in the end?" Mo Qingge secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Even though she cultivated the soul-refining art and the strength of her divine sense was far stronger than that of cultivators in the same realm as her, a core formation cultivator was still a core formation cultivator. She almost used all her strength to resist this spiritual aura pressure. She naturally knew why Elder Qingyao treated her like this. Mo Qingge had long formed a habit of using her divine sense to pay attention to her surroundings at all times, so she immediately knew Elder Qingyao was here. But even though she knew, she still said those words to Hua Yilin. As a core formation cultivator, Elder Qingyao couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed when a junior was lectured like that by a junior. It was precisely because she couldn't hold back her pride that she reprimanded Hua Yilin even more. She wanted to show that as a core formation cultivator, she would never shield a junior and lower her status. However, reprimanding was one thing, but in the end they were still her descendants. She also wanted to see why this junior who dared to lecture her descendants had such guts. He knew a core formation cultivator was coming, but he still wanted to teach a disciple of Bishuan court a lesson. How could an early-stage foundation-building cultivator be so bold? Mo Qingge only took a moment to think before she answered, "Junior is the disciple of Lord Daoist Xianin from Shenqing School." Lord Daoist Xianin. Elder Qingyao slowly uttered this Daoist name. The way she looked at Mo Qingge gradually changed. In the end, the fierceness in her expression disappeared and she showed a faint smile. "Turns out your master is a nascent soul cultivator. No wonder he has such guts." Even if she didn't know about Lord Daoist Xianin, he was naturally a nascent soul cultivator. As one of the 3 great core formation elders with the highest cultivation level in Bishuan court, Elder Qingyao naturally wouldn't be ignorant of this. Mo Qingge merely smiled and maintained her politeness. Junior was just very lucky. Although that was the case, how could a nascent soul cultivator accept a disciple so easily? If she had a nascent soul cultivator as her master, the benefits would be obvious. After forming her gold core, every step of cultivation would be difficult. 2/3 of core formation cultivators would be stuck in the early stage of the core formation realm for their entire lives. With the guidance of a nascent soul cultivator, not only would they be able to avoid many detours in the core formation realm, but they could also give them pointers when they tried to form their nascent soul. As Elder Qingyao thought about it carefully, she couldn't help but feel jealous. Although she was an elder of a cultivation group and a dignified core formation cultivator, she couldn't worship a nascent soul senior as her master right now. Nevertheless, she was an elder of a cultivation group after all, so she quickly calmed down and said with a faint smile, "In that case, little fellow Taoist must have excellent spiritual roots and extraordinary talents, right?" Mo Qingge answered faintly, "Junior's aptitude isn't bad, so Junior was able to receive Master as her master's disciple." "Is that so?" "Little fellow Taoist's pill concocting skills are also extraordinary. Elder Qingmiao said disapprovingly. Mo Chenga was keenly aware of something. Her gaze fell on Elder Qingmiao's half-smiling face and she said bluntly, "Does Senior have some advice?" Elder Qingmiao stood up and slowly paced around the pavilion, seemingly thinking about something. After a long time she finally said, "Little friend Yi, do you know of a kind of medicinal pill called Clear Sky Pill?" Mo Chenga was stunned. This is a high-level core formation medicinal pill that's 10 times better than soul-solidifying pills. When she first obtained the virtual sky world because the medicinal plants growing inside were very suitable for concocting this pill, she used this Clear Sky Pill to practice. Correct. Elder Qingmiao nodded. Little friend, you really came from a famous cultivation group. Your vision is extraordinary. Very few people know about this Clear Sky Pill. Junior's master also made a realm breakthrough several years ago, so Junior can still be considered clear about matters related to the core formation realm. Elder Qingmiao smiled at her while walking slowly. Even so, I can see that little friend Yi is very valued by your master. At first she called her little friend Yi, but now she called her little friend Yi. This form of address was much more intimate. Mo Chenga could tell that Elder Qingmiao intentionally wanted to get closer to her. Based on what she said, it was very likely related to medicinal pills. In any case, she still had some confidence in the Tao of pill concocting, so she didn't avoid the topic. Yes, Junior's achievements today are all thanks to Master's careful guidance. Seeing how calm Mo Chenga was, Elder Qingmiao inwardly re-evaluated her identity. Little friend Yi has such brilliant pill concocting skills and knows about Clear Sky Pills, so can you concoct them? And I've concocted them a few times with Master, so I can, but if I were to concoct them myself, I'm afraid the success rate wouldn't be too high. She didn't tell the truth. In fact, she didn't concoct many soul-solidifying pills, but she concocted many Clear Sky Pills. For her, the success rate of concocting Clear Sky Pills was much higher than concocting soul-solidifying pills. However, how could it be so easy for a foundation-building cultivator to successfully concoct Clear Sky Pills? This explanation was more in line with the truth. Sure enough, Elder Qingmiao didn't doubt her. She nodded and said, "If you've only concocted them a few times, your success rate naturally wouldn't be high. What's your estimate of your success rate?" Mo Chenga paused for a moment, then answered with uncertainty, "About 40 to 50%. Elder Qingmiao smiled. 40 to 50% is already pretty good. It seems little friend Ye's pill concocting skills are indeed extraordinary. 30 to 40% was the standard for ordinary concoctions masters. Although 40 to 50% seemed like an uncertain increase of 10%, it was already close to the level of great concoctions masters. After all, Clear Sky Pills were high-grade medicinal pills, so they were several times more difficult to concoct than soul-solidifying pills. Even in Kunwu, there weren't many people who could reach the level of great concoctions masters. Little friend Yi. Elder Qingmiao hesitated for a moment, but a moment later she made up her mind. During this period of time, we've been watching you teaching that girl Xiaqing pill concocting skills, so we have a good idea of your pill concocting skills. It just so happens that during this period of time, the three of us have gathered enough spiritual plants for a furnace of Clear Sky Pills, so we need to concoct a furnace of pills. However, Xiaqing has never concocted Clear Sky Pills before, so she's not confident. If we send people to Kunwu to ask someone to concoct pills for us, it'll take too much time, and it'll also be hard to find a trustworthy person, so... She stopped and looked at Mo Chenga. Little friend Yi, could you concoct a furnace of Clear Sky Pills for us? Mo Chenga didn't answer immediately. Concocting Clear Sky Pills wasn't a trivial matter. Not to mention the success rate, it would also take a long time. Of course. We trust little friend Ye's pill concocting skills, and we trust little friend Ye's character even more. If the concoction fails, we definitely won't make things difficult for you. If you succeed, we'll prepare another generous gift to thank little friend Yi for helping us. Mo Chenga glanced at Elder Qingmiao, then continued to ponder. After a long time, a smile finally appeared on her face. Since Senior said so, I have no reason to refuse. Elder Qingmiao looked delighted. She warmly held Mo Chenga's hand and patted it. Good. Although little friend Yi is a nascent soul Senior's disciple and is used to seeing precious treasures, we old fellows can still give you one or two unique little things. Yosu. Elder Qingmiao called out, causing a maid in the queue to step forward. Her cultivation level was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, and she was only a step away from entering the foundation building realm. In the end, she was a core formation elder's maid, so her cultivation level was a bit higher than Yi Lu and Yi Qiu's. Here. A few days ago we caught a Fei. In a bit you can give it to little friendy. A hint of astonishment flitted across the maid's eyes, but she didn't say anything. She only answered, "Yes, Grandmaster." Emo Chenga also looked surprised. She thought for a moment then asked, "Senior, are you talking about a kind of divine beast mentioned in ancient texts, Fei? Yes. Elder Qingyao was also surprised for a moment, but she soon smiled and said, "Little friend Ye is really knowledgeable. Nowadays, very few people know about these so-called divine beasts. However, the one I'm talking about isn't a real Fei. It just looks like a Fei and seems to have the bloodline of a divine beast, so people in the Eastern Sea call these spiritual beasts Fei. Although Fei's cultivation levels aren't high, they have miraculous effects that ordinary spiritual beasts don't have." "Oh? May I know what kind of miraculous effects it has?" Elder Qingyao smiled and said, "According to ancient texts, Fei can relieve worries. The Fei we're talking about indeed has the effect of calming one's mind if you keep it by your side. In addition, Fei are very sensitive to spiritual aura, so they're the best for searching for things." "So that's how it is," Elder Qingyao went on to say, "although this Fei we're talking about isn't an ancient era spiritual beast, it's not easy to find one in the Eastern Sea. This can be considered a greeting gift for little friend Yi. When the clear sky pills are successfully concocted, we'll prepare another generous gift for you. Even if it doesn't work, we'll still give little friend Yi compensation for your hard work." "Since Senior said so, it would be impolite for me to refuse." Elder Qingyao nodded with a smile. Little friend Yi is a straightforward person. If little friend Yi wasn't already a disciple of a famous school, this old woman would have appreciated your talent. What a pity, what a pity. "Oh no, I mean fortunately. Emo Chenga raised her head. The two of them smiled at each other. Whether they each had their own thoughts or not, they seemed to be very harmonious for now. However, it seemed their return to Kunwu would have to be delayed. Chapter 203. Once they finished talking about business, they chatted a bit more before Elder Qingyao left. Emo Chenga heaved a sigh of relief. What she told Elder Qingyao was always half true. Although she wasn't afraid Elder Qingyao would harm her, she still felt uneasy facing a core formation cultivator. Once Elder Qingyao left, Yi Lu and Yi Qiu came in. "Senior Yi." Emo Chenga wiped her face. "Why were you gone for so long?" Yi Lu said, "Junior came back a long time ago, but Elder Qingyao was here, so Junior didn't dare to disturb you. That being said, although the sect head's conference hall was far away, it wouldn't take that long. She probably came back when Hua Yilin was here, but she didn't dare to come in." Emo Chenga didn't blame them. They were Bishuan court disciples after all, so they couldn't offend an elder's descendant. "Have you reported it to sect head Wei?" Yi Lu answered, "Junior already explained it to sect head. Sect head told me to invite Senior Yi to talk about it." She originally wanted to see Wei Haolan to talk about her departure, but after what Elder Qingyao said, she didn't need to mention it anymore. Nevertheless, it was reasonable for her to talk to Wei Haolan first. After all, elders only made decisions. Some execution matters still needed the sect head's approval. Emo Chenga said, "And I'll go now." In addition, it was best to mention Tang Xin's matter to Wei Haolan. If something really happened, she didn't want to get involved. Emo Chenga was silent all the way. When she arrived at the hall, Wei Haolan was already waiting for her. As soon as she saw Emo Chenga, she came to greet her warmly. "Fellow Taoist Yi, I was held up by some mundane matters just now. I'm really sorry for making you wait for a long time." Emo Chenga smiled and returned the greeting. "Sect head Wei is too polite. I didn't wait for you, so I came a bit late." Wei Haolan led her inside, and they both took their respective seats. Maids had already served them tea. Emo Chenga stayed here for several months, and Bishuan Court's hospitality had always been excellent. As soon as the two of them sat down, Wei Haolan said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yi, I know a bit about why you came here. However, fellow Taoist Yi should have met Elder Qingyao, right?" Emo Chenga said frankly, "Yes, I originally came to say goodbye, but now I don't need to." Apparently, Wei Haolan already knew Elder Qingyao's plan. Now that she heard what Elder Qingyao said, she said, "It seems fellow Taoist Yi has agreed to Elder Qingyao's request." Emo Chenga nodded. "Since Senior Qingyao has sincerely invited me, I'll have to trouble sect head Wei for a few more days." Wei Haolan smiled happily. "What are you talking about, fellow Taoist Yi? If you can stay, everyone in my sect will be very happy. Does fellow Taoist Yi have anything to prepare for this matter? If there's anything you don't like, please don't hesitate to tell me." About that, Emo Chenga muttered to herself. There were naturally many things she didn't like about concocting medicinal pills. For example, the spiritual aura in the concocting room wasn't abundant enough, the grade of the pill furnace wasn't high enough, and the earthly fire was also a bit lacking. However, Bichuan Court still couldn't meet her requirements. Sect Leader Wei, the earth fire in your sect's concocting room is fine for concocting other medicinal pills, but it's a bit lacking when it comes to concocting clear sky pills. If you have a better concocting fire, you should be able to increase the chances of successfully concocting pills. Wei Haolan immediately said, "What kind of concocting fire does fellow Taoist Yi think you can find? If I can find one, I'll definitely use the entire sect's strength to find one for you." Emo Chenga smiled. "That's not necessary. When it comes to concocting fires, the most common ones are naturally cultivators Dantian real fire, followed by external fires like heavenly fire and earthly fire. Among them, the best are the three great real fires: sun real fire, earthly pole real fire, and samadhi real fire. The easiest to obtain is earthly pole real fire, which can be obtained as long as the earthly fire vein reaches a certain level. However, this isn't something that can be obtained just by begging. If there aren't any good earthly fire veins in Linhai, there's nowhere to get them. Therefore, after thinking about it, I can only ask the three core formation elders for help." Wei Haolan was puzzled. What should the three elders do to find a good concocting fire? There's no need to find one. Emo Chenga shook her head. Sun real fire can only be found by chance, and Samadhi real fire hasn't appeared for many years. None of the three great real fires can be found in a short time. Only the Dantian real fire of high-level cultivators can match the effects of the three great real fires in pill concocting. Although the concocting fire of core formation cultivators isn't as good, it's much better than the earthly fire currently used in concocting rooms. It should be enough to concoct clear sky pills. Oh, I see. Wei Haolan understood what she meant. Fellow Taoist Yi wants the three elders to use their Dantian real fires to help you concoct medicinal pills? Correct. Emo Chenga nodded. Of course. The three elders can take turns to rest. Even if it's a bit slow, I reckon 3 days should be enough. This? Wei Haolan hesitated. She thought for a moment, then asked, "Fellow Taoist Yi, the three elders are the cultivators with the highest cultivation levels in Bichuan Court. Usually, when the three elders are here, other disciples won't dare to offend you, but if the three elders are all tied up by other matters—" "I understand what sect head Wei means," Emo Chenga said with a smile. "That's why I said the three elders can take turns to rest. One elder only needs to provide Dantian real fire." Then what about spiritual aura consumption? Is it possible that one of the elders is providing Dantian real fire while the other two are recovering? Emo Chenga shook her head. Rest assured, sect head Wei. According to my estimation, when one elder runs out of spiritual aura, another elder will be able to recover. If they use restorative panaceas, their recovery speed will be even faster. Oh, I see. That being said, there would always be one elder in a state of abundant spiritual aura. Wei Haolan felt relieved and said with a smile, "That's easy. I'll explain it to the three elders later. Apart from that, does fellow Taoist Yi have any other requests?" Emo Chenga thought for a moment, then shook her head. None for the time being. Wei Haolan heaved a sigh of relief. Her one request already mobilized the three core formation elders. If she had any other requests, she didn't know whether she could fulfill them or not. That being the case, fellow Taoist Yi should rest for a few days. In a few days, when the materials are ready, I'll let fellow Taoist Yi have a look. Emo Chenga nodded. She indeed had to rest for a few days to adjust her body's condition to its peak. That way her senses would be sharper. However, she hesitated for a moment, then said, "Sect head Wei, there's one thing I don't know whether I should tell you or not." "What is it?" Wei Haolan was a bit puzzled by Emo Chenga's expression. Emo Chenga said, "Just now, fellow Taoist Tang Shen from your group mentioned to me whether I could take him with me if I leave." Wei Haolan was startled, then shocked. Her sharp gaze immediately swept over Emo Chenga. Emo Chenga knew Wei Haolan misunderstood her. She sighed and continued to say, "I know fellow Taoist Tang is the beloved grandson of an elder from your group, so I refused. Sect head Wei, please forgive me. Fellow Taoist Tang hasn't traveled before, so if he wants someone to take him with him, he should be accompanied by a fellow disciple. It's not appropriate for me to take matters into my own hands." Wei Haolan was also a sensible person. She immediately understood the meaning behind Emo Chenga's words and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Yi, you're being too polite. This matter was presumably Junior Marshal Brother Tang's impulsive action, and it was originally inappropriate. It's only natural that fellow Taoist refused. Seeing that Wei Haolan understood what she meant, Mo Chinga smiled and said, "I'll talk to Sect Head Wei about this matter. Alright, I'll go back and rest. I'll have to trouble Sect Head Wei to handle other chores." "Of course. Fellow Taoist Yi, please go." Wei Haolan cordially saw her off. When Mo Chinga returned to the VIP building, the maid named Liusu was already waiting outside. She was holding a pure white spiritual beast in her arms. Its spiritual aura didn't seem to be rich, it seemed to be only in the first rank. As soon as she saw Mo Chinga, Liusu bowed and saluted her. "Senior Yi, Junior was ordered by Grandmaster to bring Fei Fei here." "No need to be so polite." Mo Chinga looked at the Fei Fei in Liusu's arms and asked curiously, "This is a Fei Fei? Why does it look like it's only in the first rank?" Liusu answered, "Senior, this Fei Fei is still a cub. Our Grandmaster caught it not long ago, it was just born at that time. Moreover, Fei Fei are spiritual beasts with mediocre cultivation levels. Generally, adult Fei Fei are only in the second or third rank. They have a kind of miraculous ability, no matter how ferocious a spiritual beast is, it can coexist peacefully with them. So that's how it is." Mo Chinga reached out her hand and stroked the little beast that looked like a fox but was only as big as a kitten. Its eyes were closed. She didn't know whether it was sleeping or not, but it didn't move at all and let Mo Chinga stroke it. Liusu handed the Fei Fei to her. "Senior Yi, this spiritual beast has already hatched, so it can't recognize its master. However, Senior can use your divine comprehension to establish a contract with it to make it obey you." "Contract?" Mo Chinga raised her eyebrows. "Isn't a spiritual beast contract a contract to recognize its master?" Liusu was dumbfounded, but she soon smiled and said, "Senior, don't you know that there's a kind of spiritual beast contract where both parties sign a contract?" Seeing that Mo Chinga really didn't know, she explained, "Presumably, Senior doesn't know much about spiritual beasts, right? If the spiritual beast hasn't hatched yet, we can drip blood on it to recognize its master, but if it's already hatched, we can establish a subordinate contract with it. This can only be done if your divine comprehension is much stronger than the spiritual beast's. With this kind of spiritual beast contract, not only can the spiritual beast not harm its master, but the master also can't harm the spiritual beast." "I see." Mo Chinga roughly understood. Generally speaking, after a spiritual beast recognized its master, even its life belonged to its master, and the master didn't have any obligations. However, with this subordinate contract, the master could only order the spiritual beast, but it didn't mean he had the spiritual beast. After thinking it through, Mo Chinga asked, "Miss, can you tell me how to establish a subordinate contract?" Liusu smiled and said, "This isn't a secret technique, so of course I can." She then told Mo Chinga in detail how to establish the contract. In the end she said, "Senior Yi, rest assured. This subordinate contract can be cancelled. Grandmaster Qingmiao already cancelled the contract before, so you can establish a new contract with the Fei Fei." "I understand. Thank your Grandmaster on my behalf." Liusu bowed, gave her a jade slip that recorded how to raise a Fei Fei, then took her leave. As soon as Liusu left, Yi Lu and Yi Qiu surrounded her. "So this is a Fei Fei. It looks so cute." "Yes, it looks like a raccoon, but it's much cuter than a raccoon." The two of them had been with Mo Chinga for a long time, so they were familiar with her temperament, so they dared to get close to her. Mo Chinga smiled and asked, "Haven't you seen a Fei Fei before?" "Yes." Yi Qiu looked up and said, "Fei Fei are very rare. Although they don't have any attack power, their ability to find spiritual objects is very good, and they look cute. Whenever one appears, the asking price is extremely high. How could we have the money to buy one?" Yi Qiu said, "Even if we have the money, we can't buy one. Even the sect head doesn't have one, so how could we have a chance?" "That's right. In other words, this Fei Fei was really rare. Elder Qingmiao was really willing to pay to befriend her." Chapter 204. After obtaining the Fei Fei, Mo Chinga followed Liusu's instructions and signed a subordinate contract with it. She then gave this little spiritual beast to Yi Lu and Yi Qiu to take care of. She didn't take it with her because she didn't have time right now and because Yi Lu and Yi Qiu liked this kind of spiritual beast very much and always wanted to touch and hug it, so she might as well comply with their wishes. Spiritual beasts like the Fei Fei were cute, harmless, and had the function of calming one's mind and searching for spiritual objects, so girls liked them the most. However, Mo Qianga didn't have much of a woman's temperament. She also had the spirit-concealing pendant and countless medicinal pills, so she only had a dispensable attitude towards the Fei. However, this was Elder Qingmiao's kind intentions, so it would be embarrassing if she didn't accept it. After resting for a few days, she began to prepare to concoct clear sky pills. Mo Qianga was already very familiar with concocting clear sky pills, but this was the first time the people from Bichuan court concocted clear sky pills, so they were extremely nervous. Xia Qing asked her more than once whether she could really concoct them. At first, Mo Qianga comforted her, but in the end she simply didn't answer. She had already concocted clear sky pills countless times. Even if she used an ordinary concocting furnace and a core formation cultivator's concocting fire, she would still have a success rate of more than 60%. If everything went according to her plan and no one made a mistake, her success rate would reach 70%. If she told Elder Qingmiao about this, she would probably be very happy. Even in Kunwu, it would be very difficult to find a concocting master with a success rate of 70%, so she could only look for one in a pill concocting sect like Pill Cauldron sect. Several days passed in the blink of an eye. The preparations for concocting clear sky pills were completed, and Xia Qing showed the processed spiritual plants to Mo Qianga. Although their age wasn't too high and their quality wasn't very good, the amount was quite enough. Taking into account the failure rate, she estimated she could make about 30 pills. Clear sky pills weren't the aura-nourishing pills or aura-converging pills used by aura-refining cultivators. They contained a large amount of spiritual aura, so it would take about 10 days to half a month to refine the spiritual aura inside each pill. This mini clear sky pills should be enough for the 3 core formation cultivators to cultivate for more than half a year. As for core formation cultivators, it was very rare for them to continuously use medicinal pills to cultivate. This number was already a very impressive number. Mo Qianga told Wei Haolan her conclusion. As a result, the 3 core formation elders wanted to see her on the same day. Mo Qianga had seen a lot of core formation cultivators, so she didn't feel nervous at all. However, these 3 core formation cultivators were the best cultivators in Bichuan court after all, so it was better for her to act a bit more cautiously. After being led by Wei Haolan for a long time, Mo Qianga finally arrived at a floating pagoda towering in the clouds. Wei Haolan introduced, "This pagoda was built by the founder of our sect. It's called the Tao Achieving Pagoda. This pagoda is very special. The spiritual aura here is very rich, and the spiritual aura on each floor doesn't interfere with each other. Because of that, once cultivators form their gold cores in Bichuan court, they'll move to this pagoda to cultivate." Mo Qianga stared at the pagoda floating in the clouds and shrouded in immortal aura. She sighed and said, "Turns out there's actually such a marvelous sight in this world. If I didn't go out, I wouldn't have known the world was so vast." Just by standing outside the pagoda, one could already feel the spiritual energy in the pagoda assaulting one's senses. One could imagine how thick the spiritual energy in the pagoda was. The founder of Bichuan court was indeed an outstanding person of her generation. Wei Haolan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, ye understands this very well, and you're also the descendant of a famous cultivation group. Presumably, several hundred years later, you'll also have a chance to reach the great Tao." Mo Qianga shook her head with a smile but didn't say anything else. When they reached the bottom of the pagoda, they saw a transporting formation laid on the ground. Wei Haolan invited Mo Qianga to stand on it, then the transporting formation was activated. A white light flashed and the two of them were already standing inside the pagoda. The inside of the pagoda was very spacious, but it was empty aside from several praying mats. Upon seeing them, a middle-aged male cultivator with 3 strands of long beard walked towards them. "Greetings to the sect head." Perhaps because this male cultivator was a core formation cultivator's personal disciple, he obviously wasn't as frightened as the other male cultivators when facing Wei Haolan. His attitude was polite, but his expression was calm. Wei Haolan's attitude was also quite polite. "Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan, I brought this fellow Taoist Yi to see the 3 elders. Do the 3 elders have time?" The male cultivator's gaze fell on Mo Qianga and he quickly sized her up. He seemed a bit surprised at her young age, but he very politely withdrew his gaze and nodded towards her. "So this is fellow Taoist Yi." Mo Qianga was also quite surprised because this male cultivator was actually a late-stage foundation building cultivator. Moreover, he seemed to have already reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm. Mo Qianga raised her hands and clasped her hands in return. The male cultivator's gaze returned to Wei Haolan. "The elders are on the 3rd floor, they're waiting for the 2 of you." Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan. After Wei Haolan expressed her gratitude, she pulled Mo Chenga to the other side, then stepped on the transporting formation again. The transporting formation was activated. After the white light faded, the two of them went to the next floor. This floor was empty. Fellow Taoist Yi, aren't you very curious? Among our foundation building cultivators, the one with the highest cultivation level is actually Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan? Mo Chenga turned her head, feeling puzzled. This was Bishuan Court's business. She didn't ask, so why did Wei Haolan want to talk about it? Wei Haolan's expression was still as calm as ever, but there was a hint of jealousy in the corners of her eyes. She said flatly, "Who told Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan to be a cultivator with mutated spiritual roots that we haven't recruited in several hundred years?" Wei Haolan then turned to smile at Mo Chenga. "Fellow Taoist Yi, don't you think it's very interesting? Bishuan Court is a cultivation group for female cultivators, but the disciple with the highest aptitude is actually a male disciple." Mo Chenga shook her head. The matter of spiritual roots has always been difficult to control. Whether it's a man or a woman isn't something that can be decided by human strength. Take Xinqing School for example. In the entire school, in terms of aptitude, she was probably the one with the highest, right? However, for several generations, not only were all the genius disciples with single spiritual roots at Xinqing School male, but among the 6 great nascent soul cultivators, there was only one female cultivator. You're right. Wei Haolan smiled bitterly. Alas, although we all know it's not Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan's fault, we still feel embarrassed. In fact, weren't the 3 elders the same? But there's nothing we can do about it. Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan is currently the cultivator most likely to reach core formation in our sect, and he even has a chance to advance to nascent soul. It's been more than 1,000 years since a nascent soul cultivator appeared in our Bishuan Court. We can't miss this opportunity, even if it's a male cultivator. At the end of her speech, Wei Haolan's face revealed a resolute expression. Mo Chenga couldn't help but admire Wei Haolan. Although she was jealous, she was still able to restrain herself for the sake of the sect. Such a person was indeed suitable to be a sect leader. Sect head Wei's magnanimity is admirable. Wei Haolan shook her head. In fact, I feel very uncomfortable inside. I feel stifled if I don't say it out loud. I know fellow Taoist Yi isn't a talkative person, but it's hard for me to say these words to my fellow martial sisters. A male cultivator is actually the most promising cultivator our Bishuan Court has spent all of its resources to cultivate. Even I have to be summoned by the 3 elders to enter this Tao-achieving pagoda, but he broke the rules of this place and started cultivating here as soon as he built his foundation. At this point, Mo Chenga suddenly felt a bit strange. Sect head Wei, since this fellow Taoist Shangguan has outstanding talents and has always been cultivated with all our might, why does he still look like a middle-aged man? Wei Haolan was dumbfounded but soon smiled. Fellow Taoist Yi came from Kunwu, so you don't know about the situation in Linhai. If there were enough medicinal pills, Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan would have long formed his gold core. It's just that he's always lacked medicinal pills and couldn't concoct dustless pills, so he's been delayed for many years. Oh, I see. Mo Chenga finally understood. Wasn't the reason Bishuan Court treated her so warmly because of her pill concocting skills? They lacked resources and their pill concocting skills were also backward. Even talented cultivators would find it hard to stand out. The two of them stayed on this floor for a while. Wei Haolan heaved a sigh to relieve her mood before she smiled again. Fellow Taoist Yi, let's go up. The 3rd floor is just above us. Mo Chenga nodded, then followed Wei Haolan into the transporting formation. With a flash of white light, they arrived on the 3rd floor. They're here. Mo Chenga heard a kind voice, so she looked towards the direction of the voice. She saw 3 core formation female cultivators sitting on this floor. The one on the left was Elder Qingmiao. The one on the right looked like she was in her early 30s. She looked well-maintained and was very beautiful. Mo Chenga found some similarities between Tang Xin and her face, so she guessed this must be Elder Qingxi. As for the female cultivator in the middle, she looked the most powerful, so she must be the cultivator with the highest cultivation level in Bishuan Court, Elder Qingyi. She looked about the same age as Elder Qingmiao, but she looked much kinder. Wei Haolan led Mo Chenga over, then respectfully greeted the 3 elders. Haolan greets the 3 elders. Elder Qingyi, who was in the middle, smiled and said, "No need to be so polite." Her voice was the same as before. "Thank you, Elder." Wei Haolan stood up and introduced them to Mo Chenga. These are the 3 core formation elders of our group. Fellow Taoist, you should have met Elder Qingmiao before. These are Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingxi. Mo Chinga's guess was correct. The one in the middle was Elder Qingyi, and the one on the right was Elder Qingxi. Junior greets the three elders. Mo Chinga cupped her hands and saluted them. The three elders were interested to see her neither servile nor overbearing manner. Elder Qingyi smiled and said, "Little friend, ye doesn't need to be so polite." She then turned to the other two elders and said, "Sure enough, you're from a famous cultivation group. You can't find many people with this kind of bearing in our group." Elder Qingmiao nodded. Senior Martial Sister is right. It seems we have to send more disciples out to gain experience in the future. They'll only grow if they gain more experience. And, speaking of gaining experience, Las Yen and the others have been away for almost 2 years, but there's still no news from them. Mo Chinga's heart skipped a beat when she heard this, but her expression remained unchanged. "All right, little friend, ye is here." Elder Qingyi saw Mo Chinga standing there and said with a smile, "Little friend, ye, please forgive me. I'm old, so I'm a bit muddle-headed." Mo Chinga smiled and lowered her gaze. "You flatter me. Senior doesn't look old at all. We're cultivators. How can we take our appearances seriously?" Elder Qingyi chuckled. "Old is old. No matter how well we take care of ourselves, it's useless. However, little friend, ye is very young. It seems you're not even 50 years old yet, right?" Mo Chinga answered, "Senior has good eyesight. Junior is 39 years old now. Little friend, ye is indeed young and promising. At such a young age, not only do you have outstanding pill concocting skills, but your cultivation level is also in the late stage of the foundation building realm." Mo Chinga was startled and raised her head. Elder Qingyi, who was still smiling amiably, said slowly, "What's even rarer is that little friend Ye's breath-concealing technique is also so outstanding that even core formation cultivators can't see through it." Chapter 205. Mo Chinga's smile froze. She stared at the three core formation cultivators without saying a word. Among the three people in front of them, Elder Qingmiao had a frown on her face, Elder Qingxi had a vigilant look on her face, and Elder Qingyi still had a smile on her face, as if what she said was nothing more than a trivial matter. Wei Haolan, who was standing next to her, widened her eyes in shock. "Elder, you mean?" She turned to look at Mo Chinga, then slowly took a step back. Although she looked calm on the surface, countless thoughts were flashing through her mind. Zhong Muling once said that with the spirit-concealing pendant he refined again, it wouldn't be a problem even if she pretended to be immortal. He was one of the most powerful cultivators in the human world who had reached the soul formation stage for thousands of years. Logically speaking, even nascent soul cultivators shouldn't be able to tell. But how could three completion-leveled cultivators see through her real cultivation level? So what do we do now? Fight? She wasn't arrogant enough to think she had the ability to escape unscathed under the watchful eyes of three great core formation cultivators. Besides, a short time wasn't enough for her to enter the virtual sky world. What else could they do? The three core formation cultivators were either expressionless or smiling as they looked at her, but there was a hint of vigilance in their eyes. In the end, Mo Chinga showed a faint smile. "Senior has good eyes. May I know how you saw through it?" "Little friend Yi, you're also very calm." Elder Qingyi nodded with a smile. "In fact, there's no harm in telling you." Elder Qingmiao, who was standing on the side, also chuckled. She took over the conversation and said, "Little friend Yi, don't overthink things. This Tao-achieving pagoda is a sacred place established by the founder of Bishuan Court. There are many restrictions and mechanisms inside. Even we, the juniors who inherited it, can't figure them out. One of them is that no matter who enters this tower, all illusions will be seen through by cultivators with higher cultivation. In a way, the breath concealment technique is also an illusion." "I see." She originally thought this primordial Lady Bishui was an outstanding talent of her generation, but now it seemed she was also a heaven-gifted genius who wasn't inferior to Wanderer Ziwei. Even though she was well-read, she still hadn't seen this kind of restriction before. When she thought up to this point, Mo Chinga warned herself inwardly. Even if her aptitude was outstanding and she had a unique treasure in her hands, she still couldn't underestimate other cultivators. The world was so big, so how many extraordinary people were there? Even if they weren't as talented as her, there were still many who were smarter than her. "You don't seem afraid at all." Elder Qingxi, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. Her tone was cold and her gaze was sharp as she stared at Mo Chinga. Mo Chinga raised her eyebrows and smiled. In the beginning, Junior was indeed a bit scared. I didn't expect seniors to suddenly see through my disguise. However, if the three of you want to harm me, all you have to do is move your fingers. Why do you have to be so polite? Besides, apart from concealing my cultivation, I haven't done anything detrimental to your sect, so I don't feel guilty. Elder Chingy's interest was piqued. In that case, how do you explain concealing your cultivation level? It's hard to believe that you don't have any malicious intent. Mo Chinga said unhurriedly. In fact, Senior already told me the reason why Junior concealed my cultivation level. The three elders all revealed puzzled expressions. She continued, when this Junior said that I was 39 years old, the three seniors raised their eyebrows. The reason why this Junior hid my cultivation was because most people would think the same as the three seniors. Elder Chingy paused and glanced at the other two elders. In the end, the three of them put away their last doubts. With little friend's age, reaching the late stage of the foundation building realm is indeed too shocking. It's no wonder you were accepted as a disciple by a nascent soul cultivator. Even in the entire celestial pole, such a talent is hard to come by in 1,000 years. A great cultivation group is, after all, a great cultivation group. They were all experienced people who had mingled in the cultivation world for several hundred years. The younger disciples might not have been to Kunwu, but the three core formation elders had definitely seen the world, so how could they not understand what Mo Chenga said? In addition to pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, there was also the consideration of protecting oneself. If others misjudged your strength, they might leave you a slim chance of survival when they schemed against you. Elder Chingy sighed inwardly as she watched Mo Chenga's behavior and listened to what she said. Even though this child was still young, the way she handled things was very steady. In Bishuan Court, there were actually very few people who knew how to handle things cautiously. How could this not make people feel discouraged? Elder Qingmiao and Elder Qingshi also had the same expression. After their doubts were gone, their expressions became solemn again. They were shocked to see a genius that was hard to come by in 1,000 years, but they also thought about Bishuan Court's current situation. On the other hand, they were also wondering whether they should change the way they managed the group. To them, reaching the late stage of the foundation building realm at the age of 39 was completely unimaginable. Although they lived in Linhai, they were connected to Kunwu through a transporting formation, so their news wasn't lagging behind. In Kunwu, cultivators who could form their gold core in 100 years were few in 1,000 years, and every one of them was called a genius. That being the case, being in the late stage of the foundation building realm at the age of 39, she might be able to form her gold core in 20 to 30 years. Forming her gold core at the age of 70 would be a genius among geniuses. However, Xianqing School actually let such a genius among geniuses do as she pleased, allowing her to go out and gain experience by herself. In contrast, Bishuan Court, not to mention having such a genius, even the disciple with mutated spiritual roots they received with great difficulty was carefully kept by their side. For more than 100 years they never let that disciple leave the sect. Even other foundation-building cultivators with a bit of future didn't dare to leave the sect to gain experience. The three elders silently pondered for a while without saying anything. Wei Haolan, who was standing on the side, kept shifting her gaze between them. At that moment she couldn't help but step forward and ask, "Elders, is fellow Taoist Yi really in the late stage of the foundation-building realm?" Elder Qingyi nodded. "Haolan, it's good that you know about this. Don't leak it out, lest you get into a lot of trouble." "Yes." Wei Haolan answered in a low voice, then turned her head to look at Mo Chenga. Her gaze was filled with complicated emotions, but in the end she just sighed quietly and looked away. Regarding this fellow Taoist Yi, she was originally just envious of her good luck. She was actually a disciple of one of the biggest cultivation groups in the celestial pole. But that was all. With her status as the sect head, she really didn't need to be too fixated on this matter. Unfortunately, she now found out that this fellow Taoist Yi was already a late-stage foundation-building cultivator at such a young age. This was really incomparable. "Little friend Yi, you're so young, but you already have such a profound cultivation level. Why do you also have top-notch pill concocting skills?" Elder Qingmiao asked. Mo Chenga instantly thought of the answer to this question. "To be honest, although my aptitude can be considered excellent, I advanced after I built my foundation because I obtained fated chances. I didn't immerse myself in cultivation every day. I usually study pill concocting skills to adjust my mood. Besides, although my pill concocting skills are very brilliant in the eyes of non-pill concocting cultivators, compared to pill concocting cultivation groups like Danding School, they're really nothing." "Really?" Elder Qingshi's eyes were still filled with doubt. "The three of us aren't ignorant frogs at the bottom of a well. In the past we also concocted clear sky pills. At that time we went to Danding School to find a concocting master. Reportedly that master's pill concocting realm was already extremely high, but he still couldn't achieve a success rate of 60% or 70%. Fellow Taoist Yi, why is your pill concocting skills better than those of Danding School cultivators even though you're not a pill concocting cultivator? It's very simple. Mo Chinga said calmly, although Danding School is a pill concocting cultivation group, not everyone's aptitude for pill concocting is better than others. In terms of aptitude for pill concocting, Junior is confident I'm not inferior to others. In order to cover up the secret of the virtual sky world, she had to boast. If she said her aptitude for pill concocting wasn't good, who would believe she had a pretty good pill concocting skill? She paused for a moment then continued, moreover, seniors, please forgive Junior for speaking the truth. In the past, Danding School was at its peak and ranked among the 7 great cultivation groups. They were arrogant and probably didn't take cultivators from small cultivation groups seriously, so they only used ordinary concocting masters to deal with them. Although they were unhappy, the 3 elders could only admit that what she said was the truth. Even though they were all core formation cultivators, Danding School was quite arrogant before it declined. Even Tiandao sect and Shenqing School often needed their help and were polite to them. After a long time, how could they take core formation cultivators from small cultivation groups seriously? Now, after the demonic beast riot, Danding School's strength was greatly reduced. Being ranked among the 7 great cultivation groups was just a habit. Now it was reduced to a concocting room for the other 6 great cultivation groups. This was also because Danding School was too arrogant in the past. Otherwise, the other 6 great cultivation groups wouldn't have deliberately delayed the rescue time. Unfortunately, Danding School could only swallow this bitter fruit. In the cultivation world, being a person and managing a cultivation group were the same. If you had outstanding strength, it didn't matter if you were arrogant, but if you didn't have enough strength, it was better to keep a low profile. If you had outstanding strength and kept a low profile, that would be even better. In that case, little friend, Yi just happened to come to our Linhai. It's also our good fortune. Otherwise, it'd be very difficult to find a suitable concocting master in such a short time. Elder Qingyao glanced at Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingxi then turned around and said with a smile. Mo Chenga said modestly, speaking of concocting, Junior is only a so-so. In Kunwu there are also many great concocting masters and even great concocting masters. It's just that seniors have been living in Linhai for a long time, so you don't have much contact with them. Upon hearing what she said, Elder Qingyi nodded. Little friend Yi is neither arrogant nor rash. My disciples should learn from you. Elder Qingxi's expression was no longer cold, but she still looked solemn as she asked, Little friend Yi, if you go out to gain experience like this, will your master feel at ease? Mo Chinga was slightly surprised and raised her eyebrows. Junior doesn't quite understand what Senior is saying. Why would my master feel at ease? Elder Qingxi said, with your aptitude, your cultivation level has already reached the late stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age. Presumably your school also focuses on cultivating a genius disciple, right? Don't tell me your master isn't afraid that something might happen to you when you go out to gain experience? Her words weren't very auspicious, but Elder Qingxi's tone was very gentle, so Mo Chenga didn't mind. She smiled faintly and said, Senior doesn't know, but Shenqing School is a Dao school. Aside from cultivation level, we also focus on our mental state. Master often tells me that if one's mental state isn't strong enough, they should be cautious during realm breakthroughs. Junior deeply agrees. If we don't go out to gain experience because we're afraid something might happen, then even a genius disciple can't grow into an outstanding cultivator. If we can't truly grow, what's the use of having great aptitude? In the end, cultivation depends on one's cultivation level, realm, and ability in fights of magical powers. It doesn't depend on aptitude to advance all the way to the nascent soul realm. Therefore, even if there are some losses, it's still worth it. Chapter 206. After Mo Chenga said that, the 3 core formation elders sank into contemplation. In the end, Elder Qingyi heaved a sigh then waved her hand. You guys can go. Little friend Yi, thank you very much for your words today. As for the matter of refining pills, we will naturally do our best to cooperate. Mo Chenga bowed and no longer said anything. Accompanied by Wei Haolan, she stepped into the transporting formation and left the 3rd floor. Upon reaching the 2nd floor, Wei Haolan couldn't help but take a second look at Mo Chenga. Fellow Taoist Yi, are you really in the late stage of the foundation building realm? When Emo Chinga saw the vigilance in Wei Haolan's eyes and recalled what Wei Haolan said to her before they went up, Emo Chinga knew Wei Haolan was now suspicious of her. However, aside from borrowing the transporting formation, Emo Chinga didn't have any other requests from Bichuan court. Because of that, she was also frank and open, allowing Emo Chinga to size her up. That's right. When I'm outside I have to be careful. I didn't mean to deceive you. Please forgive me, Sect Master Wei. Upon seeing Emo Chinga's natural demeanor and the fact that the three elders didn't make things difficult for her and even spoke to her, Wei Haolan finally stopped thinking about her. Rest assured, fellow Daoist Yi. I'll naturally obey the elders' orders. Even so, Wei Haolan still turned her face away. She must have felt uncomfortable when she realized that the person she was talking about was hiding something from her. Although the two of them could not be considered friends, after so many days together, they had developed a certain level of trust in each other. Some words were spoken because of this trust. Therefore, even though Wei Haolan knew that it was not her fault, she was still unhappy. Emo Chinga didn't say anything. The two of them walked in silence until they reached the first floor. The middle-aged male cultivator surnamed Shangguan was still there. When he saw them coming down, he stood up and greeted them. Sect Het, fellow Daoist Yi. This person was very polite to Emo Chinga. When they first met, surprise flashed in his eyes. Emo Chinga originally thought he was used to being polite and courteous to female cultivators in a cultivation group for female cultivators, so she didn't pay much attention to him. In reality, this person had been carefully trained by the three core formation elders. He himself was already in the peak stage of the foundation building realm. Why would he be so polite to a cultivator in the early stage of the foundation building realm? It was naturally because his cultivation level was slightly higher than Emo Chinga's, so as soon as she came in, he discovered that this fellow Daoist Yi was actually a late-stage foundation building cultivator. Some things could be traced, but they were originally scattered and could not be pieced together. However, if one obtained the answer, one would discover that there were clues everywhere. As she thought up to this point, Emo Chinga's expression began to waver. Wasn't it the same back then? Before he discovered it, he didn't suspect anything at all. But when he thought about it, he realized that the answer was only natural. However, she still didn't want to face the answer. After all, they wouldn't be related in the future. Fellow Daoist Yi? Wei Haolan's voice rang in his ears. Emo Chinga regained her train of thought. She cupped her hands to salute the male cultivator, then went down the Dao Achieving Pagoda with Wei Haolan. After exiting the Dao Achieving Pagoda, she raised her head to look at the pagoda floating in the clouds. She couldn't help but sigh. It was actually able to make her spirit-concealing pendant lose its effect. From this, it could be seen how amazing the restrictions in this Dao Attainment Pagoda were. Furthermore, this pagoda was created by a nascent soul female cultivator, who said that female cultivators were inferior to male cultivators. There were also geniuses among them, but there weren't many female cultivators who were willing to work hard. Fellow Daoist Yi, aside from your cultivation level, do you really not have anything else to hide? Wei Haolan also stopped in front of the pagoda and stared at Emo Chinga. Emo Chinga shifted her gaze from the pagoda and showed a faint smile. Maybe I'm hiding something, but I can assure Sect Head Wei that these things are of no importance to Bichuan court. She also hid her name and master. This was Lord Daoist Jinghe's request. The reason for this was because before she left, Master Song Feng came looking for revenge and even said he wouldn't let this enmity rest. Although this master of hers cared about his reputation, he wasn't pedantic. He was willing to hide her master's identity to avoid unnecessary danger. For outsiders, however, it didn't matter whose disciple she was in Shenqing school. Wei Haolan stared at her for a long time before she finally withdrew her gaze and accepted Emo Chinga's explanation. That being the case, I won't meddle too much. Fellow Daoist Yi, it won't be a problem to start concocting medicinal pills tomorrow, right? Emo Chinga nodded. No problem. For her, concocting clear sky pills didn't require much preparation. Then I'll take fellow Daoist back. Thank you for your trouble. The two of them walked together without saying a word along the way. When they weren't far from the VIP building, a maid ran towards them in a hurry. When she saw Wei Haolan, her expression was filled with joy, but it was immediately covered with worry. She ran towards Wei Haolan and saluted her. Sect Head. Wei Haolan noticed the anxiety in her tone, so she stopped and said to Emo Chinga, Fellow Daoist Yi, I won't be seeing you off. Please don't take offense. Emo Chinga understood what Wei Haolan meant. Sect Head Wei, you don't have to be so polite. I'll go back now. Goodbye. The two of them nodded at each other, then Emo Chenga turned around and entered the courtyard. From afar, she could faintly hear the maid's voice. Sect head, another of our disciples is missing. Emo Chenga's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't stop and directly entered the VIP building. Once they saw her coming in, Ilu and Ichio both looked happy and rushed towards her. Senior Yi. Emo Chenga was astonished. What's wrong? The two of them looked very anxious just now, as if they'd been waiting for her to come back. Ichio turned around and picked up the Feifei from behind. I don't know what's going on, but Feifei hasn't been in high spirits today. Feifei was this Feifei's name. Ever since she received this Feifei, Ilu and Ichio asked her to name it. Emo Chenga didn't know how to name it, so since it was a Feifei, she'd just call it Feifei, just like how the Inferno Beast was called Xiaohua. Ilu and Ichio protested. How could she name it so casually? But their protests were useless. She was too lazy to give it another name, so she could only call it Feifei. Emo Chenga picked up the Feifei and looked at it. The originally lively little spiritual beast was now dispirited. Its eyes were half closed, and it didn't look like it was sleeping like the day she picked it up. Instead, it looked lethargic. After sensing it with her divine comprehension, she said, "It's all right. It's just that I didn't have time to take care of it these days. It's in a bad mood, so it's lethargic." Oh. Ilu and Ichio felt relieved, but at the same time they were reluctant to part with it. I thought Senior couldn't take care of it while you were concocting pills, so we could continue to take care of it. It seems we have to return it to Senior. Emo Chenga smiled but didn't say anything. She picked up the Feifei, took the spiritual fruit Ilu gave her, and personally fed it. Feifei obviously didn't have much appetite and refused to eat. Seeing that it was still lethargic, Ilu and Ichio couldn't bear to tease it anymore, so they reluctantly returned it to Emo Chenga. When the two of them left, Emo Chenga specifically told them that she had to rest well and prepare to concoct pills the next day. Ilu and Ichio had already received instructions from the sect head, so they immediately said that they wouldn't let anyone disturb them. After the two of them left, Emo Chenga opened the formation in the house and entered the virtual sky world with Feifei in her arms. Once they entered the virtual sky world, Feifei, who was half dead a moment ago, suddenly opened its eyes wide. It jumped down from Emo Chenga's arms and threw itself into the small house. It rolled around on the praying mat, making woo-woo sounds and looking very happy. Emo Chenga couldn't help but laugh. She grabbed a praying mat from the side and sat down. She then reached out to pinch its round nose. You mischievous spirit, you actually wanted to come in, didn't you? A few days ago she took Feifei into the virtual sky world once. Feifei was as happy as Xiaohua when it came in for the first time. Later she was busy with concocting pills, so she left it to Ilu and Ichio to take care of. She didn't expect that this little guy would never forget about it and even pretended to be sick. If it weren't for the contract between her and Feifei, she really would have been deceived by it. Speaking of which, were spiritual beasts more sensitive to the space inside the virtual sky world? Xiaohua was like this, and so was Feifei. Or could it be said that all living things were passed down from the distant past era to the present day? Humans gradually became more rational while spiritual beasts retained their instincts, so they had the mark of the distant past era in their bodies? Because of that, they preferred the space from the distant past era, such as this virtual sky world. Feifei raised its head, arched its head next to her, grabbed her clothes with its teeth and dragged her outside. Emo Chenga helplessly stood up and followed it. What are you doing? I let you in, so you should behave a little more, right? Although Feifei was intelligent, it was only a first-rank demonic beast. It was inferior to Xiaohua, who had lived in the virtual sky world for many years. Fortunately, she and Feifei had a contract, so she could roughly sense its mood. Emo Chenga saw it trotting along the ridge of fields she opened. As it ran, it sniffed as if it was looking for something. Finally, Feifei stopped under a tree. It was a tree that was entirely yellow. Different from ordinary trees, its yellow color wasn't the yellow of a withered tree that had reached the limit of its life and was about to shed its leaves. Instead, it was a kind of brilliant and colorful golden yellow that was about to be harvested. Its branches and leaves were lush and full of fruits. Emo Chenga knew this tree was called the flowerless golden tree, and the fruits it bore were called the flowerless golden fruit. It ripened once in 100 years, and its fruits would dry up after being picked. Its fruits and leaves could be used to concoct medicinal pills, but they were high-grade medicinal pills that Emo Chenga couldn't use right now. There were too many spiritual beasts like this in the virtual sky world, so she was too lazy to care about them. She just let the flowerless golden tree bear fruit, and the fruits fell to the ground and grew into small saplings. At that moment, Feifei circled around the tree, turned its head and squeaked at Emo Chenga. Emo Chenga said, "This flowerless golden fruit can only be taken by cultivators above the nascent soul realm. You're only a first-rank spiritual beast now. What if your spiritual aura explodes after eating it?" Feifei widened its black eyes and glared at her for a while. It then bit the hem of her clothes and squeaked again. Emo Chenga sensed with her divine sense that Feifei seemed very sure this fruit was harmless to her. She thought for a moment then nodded. "Alright, I'll let you eat one first. If there's nothing wrong, you can eat whatever you want in the future as long as you don't eat it all up. But if there's something wrong, you're not allowed to touch these spiritual plants carelessly." Feifei raised its head and squeaked happily. It then circled around her left and right. Emo Chenga smiled, raised her hand and gently picked one of the fruits. She then crouched down and held it in front of Feifei. "Here, be careful. The spiritual aura inside is very strong." Oh. Feifei snorted and bit the flowerless golden fruit. The flowerless golden fruit looked a bit like a plum, but its outer skin was golden. When Feifei bit it, the skin immediately broke, revealing the golden flesh inside. It hastily opened its mouth wide and swallowed the fruit in one gulp. It didn't even chew. In the end, it even stuck out its tongue and sucked all the juice that dripped down. Emo Chenga smelled a very fragrant aroma. This was a unique aroma. It wasn't as intoxicating as the aroma of flowers, nor was it as rich as the aroma of musk and the like. Instead, it was very sweet, carrying the aroma of earth and green leaves. This aroma quickly faded, but it still didn't disperse. It was as if the fur on Feifei's whole body carried this aroma. Feifei was very satisfied after eating the flowerless golden fruit. It lay on the ground, enjoying the gentle breeze and even rolled around. However, its expression soon turned to one of pain. Emo Chenga immediately sensed it due to the connection between them. Feifei. Emo Chenga looked down and saw that Feifei, who was enjoying itself a moment ago, was now enveloped by a golden aura. This was an extremely strong spiritual aura, even surpassing the spiritual pressure of a nascent soul cultivator. Emo Chenga was filled with regret. No matter how smart Feifei was, it was only a first-rank spiritual beast that hadn't grown up yet. How could it know that there were some things it could eat and some things it couldn't? If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have let it eat indiscriminately. Chapter 207. Emo Chenga rushed back to the hut with Feifei in her arms. For a moment she didn't know what to do. Feifei was only a small first-rank spiritual beast, so it definitely couldn't bear this spiritual aura. But how could she draw out this spiritual aura? A thought flashed through her mind and Emo Chenga immediately made a decision. She took out several spirit stones and formation discs and quickly laid a formation. This was a defensive formation called the dungeon formation, which was most suitable for defending against spiritual aura attacks. However, she made some modifications, hoping to suppress the spiritual aura inside Feifei's body and make it feel better. Then she pressed Feifei's head and probed its body with her spiritual aura to explore the situation inside Feifei's body. This golden aura didn't rebound her spiritual aura, but it was extremely tough and filled all of Feifei's meridians. No matter how Emo Chenga probed, she couldn't go deep inside. She could only barely enter the entrance of Feifei's meridians and couldn't go any further. After probing for a long time without any results, Emo Chenga had no choice but to let go. This spiritual aura had exceeded her current ability, so she couldn't do anything about it. In desperation, she could only hold Feifei and feed it healing and analgesic medicinal pills, hoping it would feel better. Time passed bit by bit. At first, Feifei was rolling around in pain, but later on, it no longer had any strength. Its black eyes were wide open, filled with pain. However, Emo Chenga sensed that this spiritual aura was slowly fading away. Feifei's body seemed to be constantly being transformed, and its pain was also alleviated. Emo Chenga was shocked. Feifei, hold on. It seemed her animal instincts weren't wrong. This spiritual aura was indeed good for Feifei. Maybe it would be fine after it endured. Feifei whimpered and struggled against this power. Emo Chenga remembered her situation in the foundation building realm and said hurriedly, Feifei, maybe you're going to make a realm breakthrough. Don't fight against the spiritual aura. Guide it. Although Feifei still couldn't understand her words, its divine comprehension could sense her meaning, so it quickly did as she said. Sure enough, the pain became lighter and lighter, and the spiritual aura flowed into Feifei's meridians. Emo Chenga breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay now. You just need to guide this spiritual aura well. The advancement of spirit beasts was different from that of humans. Their bodies seemed to possess the primordial memories, and they were naturally sensitive to the fusion of spiritual energy. Therefore, it was much easier for spirit beasts to advance compared to human cultivators. However, due to the lack of spiritual chi in this world and the fact that very few cultivators could constantly feed their spirit beasts with pills, there were not many high-rank spirit beasts. Right now, Feifei had already extricated itself from the spiritual aura explosion state, and Mo Chenga also sensed that it was in the process of making a realm breakthrough, so she knew it could be said to be out of danger. A spirit beast's intuition was truly extraordinary. It was able to find a spirit herb that could help it advance after flying for a while. Back then Xiaohua was also the same. When Mo Chenga raised it in the virtual sky world, it ate something that made it advance and even changed its own ardent yang real fire into sun real fire. He didn't know if Feifei would have a special ability after eating this flowerless golden fruit. However, she didn't have time to wait for Feifei to make a realm breakthrough. Bishuan Court was still waiting for her to concoct clear sky pills. Mo Chenga placed Feifei inside the dungeon formation, letting it make a realm breakthrough on its own, then meditated for a while. After she finished regulating her breath, she pondered for a moment, then tidied up her magic weapons and tools. She didn't know why, but the space between her eyebrows suddenly twitched when she thought about concocting medicinal pills. She put on the heaven and earth cloud silk armor and cloud treading boots, then put the white silk handkerchief, the shuttle of flying Apsara, the enchanting lantern, the land-fleeing ruler, and other things in an easily accessible place. After a moment of hesitation, she also put the 2 stone sculpture puppets into her Chengkuan bag in case of emergencies. After she finished doing all this, it was almost time. Seeing that Feifei was doing well, she left the virtual sky world and let it make a realm breakthrough on its own. After all, a realm breakthrough wasn't a matter of 1 or 2 days, it might take more than half a year. Soon after she left the virtual sky world, Yi Qiu called out from outside, "Senior Yi, are you ready?" She withdrew the defensive formation she laid here, then walked out of the room. Yi Lu and Yi Qiu were already waiting outside. "All right, let's go." "Yes." When she arrived at the concocting room, she saw that the 3 core formation elders were already waiting for her. Mo Chenga stepped forward to greet them. "Greetings to the 3 seniors." The 3 of them nodded. Elder Qingyi smiled and said, "Little friend, Yi doesn't need to be overly courteous. We'll have to rely on you today." Mo Chenga smiled and cupped her hands in greeting. She no longer bothered with pleasantries and went to check on the preparations. "Fellow Taoist Yi." Xia Qing walked towards her. Mo Chenga was startled. Xia Qing looked exhausted, her eyes were lifeless and her voice was hoarse. "Fellow Taoist Xia, what happened to you?" Xia Qing rubbed her eyes and said, "It's nothing. I'm just too tired." "You're going to concoct medicinal pills today. Shouldn't you have rested well yesterday?" Elder Qingxi clasped her palms together, operated her spiritual aura, and pushed her right palm horizontally. A wisp of spiritual aura gushed out from her palm and immediately turned into Dantian real fire, rushing towards the bottom of the furnace. A core formation cultivator's Dantian real fire was many times better than the earth fire in this place, so the pill furnace almost immediately heated up. Mo Chenga opened the pill furnace and quickly threw several kinds of spiritual plants inside. She then closed the pill furnace and concentrated on sensing the situation of the spiritual plants inside with her divine sense. Several kinds of spiritual plants soon turned into liquid and mixed together, emitting a strong medicinal fragrance. Although the speed wasn't as fast as when she used sun real fire, it was still many times faster than when she used earth fire. In fact, if she used the purple wooden cauldron to concoct clear sky pills, she could probably finish concocting them in half a day, but she absolutely couldn't take out the purple wooden cauldron. Not to mention that it was a magic weapon used by a deification cultivator, just the sunstone she sealed inside was already very precious. Inside the pill furnace, several kinds of medicinal liquids were undergoing drastic changes. Mo Chenga sat cross-legged with her eyes closed, but her divine sense never once relaxed, paying close attention to the changes inside the furnace. At this moment, Elder Qingyi was standing guard outside the door. All the part-time disciples had already been driven away, so there were only 5 people left inside the concocting room. Mo Chenga was paying close attention to the inside of the pill furnace. Elder Qingxi was concentrating on using her Dantian real fire, while Elder Qingmiao, Wei Haolan, and Xia Qing were watching the concocting process without blinking. Time passed slowly. Elder Qingxi's complexion gradually turned pale. She had been using her Dantian real fire for 6 hours, so she had already consumed a lot of her spiritual aura. Mo Chenga opened her eyes. Upon seeing this situation she said, "Senior Qingmiao, please come and take Senior Qingxi's place." Upon hearing her voice, Elder Qingmiao stood up and walked over. She then sat next to Elder Qingxi and used her spiritual aura to force out her Dantian real fire. In a split second, Elder Qingxi withdrew her Dantian real fire. With Wei Haolan's support, she sat next to Elder Qingxi and began to meditate to recover her spiritual aura. Mo Chenga took a look. Elder Qingmiao's and Elder Qingxi's Dantian real fires were almost the same. This was better than she expected. Although the difference wasn't big, the more stable the concocting fire was, the better it was. That way there wouldn't be any uncontrollable changes to the spiritual medicines. Seniors, you can decide when to switch next. It's best if you don't use up all your spiritual aura before switching. That way it'll be easier for you to recover. Elder Qingmiao nodded, then concentrated on sending her Dantian real fire. Once she felt the materials inside the furnace were almost full, Mo Chenga opened the lid and put most of the materials inside. She then quickly closed the lid, sat on the side and began to make hand seals. Soul solidifying pills were relatively easy to concoct, but clear sky pills could definitely be considered high-grade medicinal pills, so they needed to be matched with many hand seals. The incomparably complicated hand seals were made one after another, almost without any pause. They were like floating clouds and flowing water, causing Xia Qing, who was watching from the side, to widen her eyes. Such complicated hand seals required a very long time to practice. Xia Qing admitted she was still a bit lacking. She really didn't know how talented this fellow Taoist Yi was in pill concocting. She wasn't a concoctions master specializing in pill concocting, but she was even better than her. In fact, Mo Chenga also practiced. Her pill concocting talent was very ordinary, but she concocted a lot of medicinal pills. Moreover, all of them were high-grade medicinal pills, which was how she managed to practice making hand seals. She recalled seeing Qingxi's hand seal technique years ago. At that time she was already gasping in amazement. It was only after she started concocting that she realized she still underestimated him. He had such exquisite hand seal technique, and he even memorized it after seeing it once. His pill concocting skills were much higher than hers, so how could an ordinary aura refining cultivator who just built his foundation possibly achieve this? She sighed inwardly, then closed her eyes, concentrating on sensing the condition of the concocting furnace. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.